All right, here we are with the Flat Earth Roundtable. I want to say thank you for everyone for joining us this evening. And we want to take a time to let everyone kind of give us your background, your elevator pitch on where you fall in this, what your background is.
Yeah, who you are and which side of the coin you fall on.
So Adam and Jaron, Adam and Tack, we'll start with you guys because you guys are on the Twisted 10 podcast. Why don't you give us your background?
Cool. Hey, first of all, thanks for having us on, guys. It's an honor. We appreciate the invite.
It's always an honor when you get to talk to us, but keep going.
Yeah, what they're referring to, if you haven't heard, we have a podcast called The Twisted 10, and the guys from Hysteria 51 came on and did their own list. So be sure to go check that out. Is that a shameless enough plug so far for us, Tack? Is it? Ding!
Perfect.
My name's Adam. I am a podcaster. I like long walks on the beach. Now, my background is actually in IT. I've worked DoD for about 3 years over at CENTCOM. I worked Department of State for 10 years, Iraq, Colombia, several other out-of-country locations, and then now I'm working at NASA. I'm an IT guy out at NASA.
So you get the my printer won't print, but at NASA.
Oh no, it's IT, so it's like my rocket won't boost.
Yeah. You know that button that you're supposed to push to actually launch the rocket? Yeah, we install that.
Yeah, exactly.
Tack, tell us about yourself.
All right, my name is Tack Van Sickle, and I'm also on the Twisted 10 with Adam as well. We also do another podcast together. It's called Living Podcariously, and I should go check that one out. It's similar, but it's a little more graphic. And let's see. I'm sorry?
You get the thumbs up from us on graphic.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Let's see. I was in the United States Navy. I was in submarines for 8 years. Then now I do podcasting, and I'm also a security officer at SpaceX.
All the failed and successful SpaceX.
Supposedly?
Yeah.
All right. Next, David Weiss.
My name's David Weiss. I am just an independent researcher. Woke up to a lot of lies in the world. And several years ago, I discovered that the reality of the world that we live on is not what they show us. And anyone that takes the time to look can clearly see.
What about you, Jaron? Yeah, David actually brought us to your our attention. What's your background?
Well, hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. My name is Jaron. I'm in the Monterey Bay Area in California. I was a store manager for a drugstore for about 14 years. And then after I stopped working there and started working from home, started looking into some things. And starting around November 2014 or so, started looking into moon landings and just kept doing research from there and came to the conclusion that the Earth is not the spinning ball I was taught as a child.
Excellent. I went down the working at home route myself, and I find myself on my free time just falling down rabbit holes like crazy. It's crazy. And then finally, we got Greg Finn. Greg, you want to give us your background?
Oh, where do I start? I've been a science educator, I guess you can say, for the better part of a decade now. I started off as a TA and a tutor in college studying astrophysics. And when I graduated, I came home on my way to grad school, and some life events happened, and I got kind of stuck here. So I've been taking odd jobs here and there as a tutor, as a instructor for physics labs. I did a planetary science and astrophysics at one of our local universities for several semesters, and I currently work as a high school teacher here in Jacksonville, Illinois. Well, technically it's the summer right now, so not really, but we've been just kind of working around central Illinois looking for money as a educator. But yeah, physics and astrophysics, especially, and astronomy are kind of my high points, I guess you can say.
Awesome. So if it wasn't clear to the listeners at home, I believe Adam, Tack, and Greg fall on the side of not being flat Earth believers, and David and Jaron fall on the side of believing in the flat Earth. Guys, before we get into individual questions where we look specifically at if this then that, I think it's important to set the table to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. And I first want to talk about the terms that we're probably going to bandy about tonight, and that's like evidence and proof. I've listened to videos from both Jaron and David. I've talked to Adam and Tack and Greg. I haven't talked to you, but I'm sure I know what side of things you fall on. But we all use similar terminology, and that is like we've seen proof of this. We don't have evidence of that. So I think it's important to talk about those terms. I know what we would call mainstream science utilizes. It's the scientific method, right? So the question I think is for more our flat Earth believers, David and Jaron. The scientific method is a process for experimentation. It's used to explore observations and then answer the questions. That's it. I mean, there's no conspiracy there. Like it's just a process. You can use it to test things that you believe in from the flat Earth or regular science. But I mean, obviously it's not perfect. Scientists studies how stars change or how dinosaurs digested their food. You can't, forward a star's life by 1 million years or run medical exams on a dinosaur. When direct experimentation is not possible, generally scientists modify the scientific method. Even when modified, the goal remains the same: to discover the cause and effect relationships by asking questions, carefully gathering and examining that evidence, and then seeing if all the information can be combined into a logical answer. My question is, you might have different evidence than non-flat earthers, but do you take that same approach?
I'll go first on that one. Absolutely. And I think that the scientific method, I don't think anybody's going to argue at all with that being the number one way to come to, or at least come the closest as possible to the truth. But I think science, which taught us all about the scientific method and said that they're not responsible for telling us what the truth is, that they're not about truth. They can prove things to be false, but not necessarily true. Yet they go around and teach children at a very young age what the truth is about many things. And as a 6-year-old, you have no idea. You can't go and actually look into the things that they tell you have been proven. And when you get to a certain age and you go and look into those things, you should be able to find the evidence and the clear proofs of those things that were taught to you at 6. And when you can't, that's what creates the problem.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that, the things that they're teaching children for what's in our textbooks and things like that aren't actually peer reviewed, but just propaganda for the most part? Or do you think it's not propaganda? They're just ignorant to the fact that it's untrue.
I think sometimes there might be more than one explanation, and if science chose to go a certain direction without employing the scientific method, meaning they just chose ideologically or philosophically to go in a certain direction, that's not right. You have to explore all options. And there's great scientists who come out and flat out admit, like George Ellis, that cosmology has chosen to go a certain direction, that there's many different possibilities and models that can prove our observations, but they chose philosophically to go in a certain direction. And he doesn't have a problem with that, because he says, as long as you let people know that. The problem is, he says that a lot of cosmology tries to hide that. When I hear that from a scientist, when a scientist tells me that a lot of cosmology tries to hide something, I have a huge problem. That's not science. Science has nothing to do with lying to people to try and prove a point or to try and push their narrative.
So what you are saying is that you believe in the process of the scientific method. You don't believe in the way in which it's been demonstrated throughout the years. Is
Correct.
that fair? Okay.
Yep.
Now, Greg, do you have any feedback on the thoughts on cosmology?
Yeah, that's kind of in your ballpark.
Oh yeah. Oh boy, do I. So here's the thing, right? So I started off in college, and when I took my cosmology class, was what we call the GR class, is general relativity. When I took that class, it was one of those times where when you see the math and you see it all just kind of fall into place, it's just stunning, right? But the math and the concepts that are involved with that level there just aren't. They're not ready. Let me rephrase that. The public just is not ready for that level. So from going back on what Jaron was talking about, when we're younger, when we're 5, 6, 7 years old, 4 or 5, or in that area, you have to start them off easy, You have to say, okay, well, balls will always fall to the ground. Or you have to say, if you spin around, your arms will go up. But you have to start them off easy and then gradually work them into that level. So it's one of those things that you start them off easy, you start them off with a simplistic view, and then as you go on and you get more and more interested, if you get more and more interested, that's when just, like most anybody, you fall down the rabbit hole and you just see how deep it really does go. And and for me, when I started off here in Jacksonville, I went into it expecting my students to be A+ level students, because they were A+ level students. But then I realized that my background was way too high. I mean, I was going in at like, let's do this and this and this, and they were just having none of it. And so I had to kind of bring it back a little bit, water it down a bit, and then from there we were able to work on it as we went on throughout the year, and seeing how students and kids in general, react to that kind of like hard-hitting thing. It's not that hard to extrapolate it out and say, hey, maybe the general public sees it this way, and it's easy to start them off on an easy kind of a softball type of mentality than it is to just say this is the way it is, and here's all of the math. Just look at it.
I got a follow up, I guess. So when you've had a little bit longer of a background than the others here, all of us included. When you were studying in college and things, did flat Earth come up? Was that something that was talked about or bandied about at that time? Or this is more of a newer concept that's kind of permeated?
Right. When I was in school, we had a few people that said that what if the Earth was flat? And you know what? Honestly, some of the math does work out to say, hey, maybe the Earth is flat, but not everything does. So the most logical conclusion is that the Earth indeed is round, in fact, a sphere. But at the time, nobody really kind of questioned that because it was the simplest thing. And so it was just kind of one of those things that, you grow up with it. And, when you get to that point, it just makes more sense when you see everything kind of when you dive down into it, it just makes more sense that way because it is simpler than everything that we were talking about with cosmology. So this is a question for David and Jaron. We kind of, now that we've set the table, why don't you hit us with the most basic of your thoughts, and we'll start the conversation from there, start the roundtable from there, and we can all react and talk to it from there.
Okay, I guess my first question would be for people that understand the current model. With special relativity and general relativity, and the reason I'm bringing this up is if I can ever find lies being told to me, then I think it's definitely required of me to question other things in that paradigm. So if I'm not lied to, then for the most part, I have no reason to question things. So in general relativity and special relativity, does absolute motion exist?
What do you mean by absolute motion?
Absolute motion. It isn't the idea of relativity that all motion is relative.
It's the idea that motion, as well as the experience of space-time, is relative to different frames of reference. Yeah.
Okay. So that being said, when we're taught relativity is the truth, then how can you also say that the Earth goes around the sun? Because in order to say that, you are putting absolute motion to the Earth. When if it's all relative, then isn't it true that from the Earth, the sun appears to go around the Earth, and from the sun, the Earth appears to go around the sun?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's literally what relativity is that from the frame of reference from the sun, the Earth moves around it. But from our perspective, the sun seems to move around the Earth.
Okay, so if that's the truth, relativity, then why would we teach children in school that the Earth goes around the sun? You just contradicted one of the main tenets of cosmology, which is relativity, followed by children, you all go around the sun, and if anybody ever says that the sun goes around the Earth, they get laughed at. What would be the reason we're basically not telling the truth there?
Well, no, it's not so much that we're not telling the truth, because that is the physical, actual truth, is that the Earth does move around the sun. But from our reference, it's that little modifier, that qualifier that goes right in front of it. It's from our reference point. So what a lot of teachers do is they just say, hey, the Earth goes around the sun, and they don't put that extra qualifier. But from our perspective, the sun moves around the Earth. That's what I always try to do with my astronomy kids. I try to say, it's not hard for you to stand out in the middle of the night, look up at the sky, and see the stars and the moon and the planets seem to go around us in a giant ball. But when you look at everything else, it makes more sense that we're on a ball that then moves around the sun, and then everything moves also around the sun. It's a lot simpler. But from our perspective, everything seems to be moving around us. But from another perspective, let's say the sun or another star, it would see that everything else moves around it.
So Greg, it sounds like what you're saying is just because it appears like that to us doesn't mean that that's the reality. I would suppose, like if you're on an L train here in Chicago going right against the highway and you have a car going the same speed, it appears to be almost sitting still next to you. Right. But that's not the reality. We're both moving at 60 miles an hour or whatever it is.
Right. From somebody standing on the side of the highway, they would see the train go by at 50 miles an hour and the car go by at 50 miles an hour. But from you sitting in the train or you sitting in the car, nothing else is moving except the surroundings. That's relativity.
TAC and Adam, you guys that you work with NASA and SpaceX, how does this affect you guys? Does Flat Earth creep into your conscious? Do you have dealings with it? Do you guys address it at NASA and SpaceX in any way, or what's the deal there?
Well, we don't necessarily see it in our day-to-day operations for what we do at the two different space areas that we work down here at Kennedy Space Center. But in our personal lives, I've read a lot of the research and watched a lot of the videos, and I have been. It still left me with questions on how basic physics and the general understandings that we currently have would be contradicted with the flat Earth theory. It's not so much in our business professions as it is in my personal desires. I'm fascinated to meet you guys that believe this, and I'm not saying that in an insulting way. I really want to understand some of the questions that I've got that you guys have the answers and the conclusions to draw the Earth is flat. I mean, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to me. So,
Jaron, when do you think the flat Earth movement picked up steam like it is? Because it is everywhere now. When do you think that permeated into the popular culture like it has?
It seemed to start around February of 2015. At least that's when I made my first video. I would say that I kind of came to that conclusion around November, and my wife was telling me to make videos, and I told her no because I couldn't find anybody else that was kind of saying the same thing. And so we just kept looking into it, kept doing our own research, and kind of had that belief, but were afraid to voice it. And then in February, a Mark Sargent came out with a series of videos called Flat Earth Clues. And in watching those videos, the way that he presented it and the way that he explained his beliefs or his ideas, I said, you know what, I could do that. I could speak while showing pictures on the screen. And I kind of even thought that if people started making fun of me or whatever, I would just say I was kidding and that this guy told me to do it or whatever.
Right, yeah.
So then from there, as I started to talk about it, more people started making their own videos. I started getting emails from people saying, we've always felt this way. And then started finding, research that had been kind of swept under the rug from years ago and books. And then just from there, it became a daily kind of research thing. And it just has grown, on its own. I think it's a grassroots movement, just people starting on YouTube, making videos, talking about it, shows and little hangouts. And I'd say since about February.
Well, so what's your smoking gun to you? What's the one, I don't know if you even pick one, but what would you say is the one thing you're like, this is what everyone needs to see, and this is going to make you understand that flat Earth is true and that everyone else has, collectively been lying or misinformed?
That's a tough
and
one.
David also, either of you two.
I'll just answer real quick. For me, it's a tough one because I would say I believe in the flat Earth because of all my videos, and I think at this point it's like 270. I would never say that there's any one video that made me a believer. It's an accumulation of everything, because if it's a deception, and let's just pretend it is a deception that we live on this ball, then it's going to be covered up quite well to the point where, it's going to be tough to just pull that one thing out of a hat and say, this is the reason why. To me, I guess if you asked me that one thing, maybe I would say that water finds its level in all my experience, that I don't think water bends with the force of gravity. Those things that were taught to me that we were told could be shown in a lab if they were scientific. I've yet to see any mass of a sphere hold water to its surface in any way. So to me, I don't see water of the oceans bending. I don't think that people in Australia are upside down compared to me.
That's a good place to kick off the next part of the conversation. You one of the things you just mentioned was you don't see water adhering to a sphere. I think that kicks into the gravity conversation. Greg, tell us if you can and I suppose for us at least, maybe not our audience, but for us in relatively middle school or high school terms, how does the water of the oceans stay on the Earth and not fly out into space?
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. It's a really cool thing. So there's these things called tides, right? So we already know that tides come in, tides go out. They happen about twice a day, or twice every 24-hour period or so. And so that's actually caused by the moon pulling on the Earth. So we actually know that the water on Earth doesn't perfectly stay stuck to the surface. It does get pulled everywhere it goes, but it does have to do with the fact that gravity, the gravity of the Earth. So the Earth is giant, right? I don't think anybody's really kind of not saying that it's the Earth is ginormous, but
even if it's flat, it's big.
even if it's flat, it's huge. And so because of that, the mass of the Earth is so freaking large that pretty much anything itself anything that's sitting on it is actually going to be pulled to the surface. Now, a lot of people would say, well, if the Earth is spinning, why don't we fly off? Like, if you spin a wet basketball, things fly off the surface. Well, that has to do with centripetal force. It's that the centripetal force required to keep an object on the surface of the Earth is way less than the centripetal force of the keep an object stuck on the Earth is less than the gravity that's pulling you inwards. And so because of that, the water will stay on the surface of it, even if the Earth is spinning, because the gravity that's holding it to the surface itself is way bigger than the centripetal force that's required to have it be flung off. So it's one of those things that the Earth is massive, and anything massive that's next to the Earth will just be stuck to its surface.
So, David, we'll point this at you. You heard the basic version of why the water doesn't leave. What would be your response to that?
So gravity has never been proven. Scientists don't even know what gravity is. It doesn't make any sense if you really think about it. Gravity is able to hold trillions of tons of water to a spinning ball, but people can jump in the air. Butterflies can fly away. Supposedly, is it gravity that holds the atmosphere to the spinning ball and spins it with it at all different altitudes? Because it has to spin faster as it goes up higher. And what's to stop the vacuum of space from taking that atmosphere off?
I'm just asking, wouldn't the basic argument there be just the math behind it? A butterfly can fly away because it's so light as compared to the gravitational force, as compared to the wind and all of that. Wouldn't that just be like the basic argument there? So,
there's so many things about gravity. If you really start looking into it, it's never been proven. We're told that the sun, this massive, gravitational force has grabbed the Earth, and the Earth is flying through space, falling around the sun, never, crashing into it, because it just keeps missing it by its huge orbit. And then somehow magically this moon is close enough to the Earth where the Earth's gravity has captured the moon, and the moon is falling around the curve of the Earth. But the sun never rips the moon away from the Earth or any of the other 100 gravitational objects in our solar system that are whizzing all around. Their gravity never tugs at the Earth or the moon. If you really look at it, it's impossible. And Jaron is better versed on this, but I don't believe NASA is able to model anything a three-body problem. They can only model a two-body problem, and the rest is just theory. Jaron, you want to touch on that?
Well, yeah, it's not so much that they can't model it, because there is computer programs that can simulate it, pretty close. But as far as a mathematical equation to figure out any kind of three-body problem, it's not possible, because soon as one item moves an inch in one direction, you've now affected the gravity and the pull and the force of every other item that's involved. So, that kind of tells me that it is kind of not random. I don't want to say random, because like I said, they can do a simulation, but yeah, NASA can't do a three-body gravitational problem. Isn't it true to the two guys that work for the space agencies that said that they don't really use flat Earth in their work? Isn't it true, though, that you use a geocentric frame of reference? You don't use the heliocentric frame of reference when you're figuring out satellites and orbits, things like that?
You guys are asking some good questions. I'm trying to keep us muted as much as possible on this side, so forgive me if I'm going in and out for the microphone. But
you're fine.
As far as what's used for calculations of satellites, to be honest, at this point, because there's so many that are commercial as well, NASA doesn't run the specificity, if I said that right, for those individual companies. So it could be any combination of calculations that they're using. Just don't screw up your metrics and your standards. That's the only thing I would say.
Yeah.
I do have a back question to ask you guys. With regards to the flat Earth perspective, do you see the rest of the solar system, the rest of even the closer objects to us, like inside our own solar system, as spherical objects that are orbiting the moon, orbiting the sun? Do you see Earth as just the only flat area, and the other areas as being those other objects in our solar system as being spherical, as being those types of objects that we believe the Earth is as well?
I'll jump real quick, and then Jaron, you can comment. Understanding the flat Earth model, the Earth is not a flat disk floating in infinite space. The Earth is all that there is. It is a flat, with hills and valleys, of course, flat land where we live, and all of the things we see in the sky are we only see lights up there. We don't really see anything. Planets are only described to us by Disney and NASA, but when you look through a telescope, you just see a light. I've had access to some pretty high, powerful observatory, a powerful, if I could speak, observatory when I was in college, and I did look at Saturn, and it sure looks spherical to me, but it doesn't look the distance it says away. It looks very, very close. In the flat Earth model, we see all of these lights in the sky as close, and if you ever wonder as a kid, why are all the planes, all of the planets, supposed planets, on the same flat plane in our solar system? And that's because they're all traveling over the flat Earth plane.
That's a fantastic answer. Can I ask you just a follow up, Brent? I don't know if that's stepping on the format, but is that
absolutely
okay? Let's assume in the scenario that for what I'm about to give you, that it is a flat Earth scenario, and so we're perceiving what's in the sky from where we're at on that flat area. Well, in the same way that the technology works behind 3D film to record, these cool 3D films that we see on TV, what if two locations on the flat Earth surface were to film that planet, those rings of Saturn, from their two different vantage points? Granted, the minuscule difference wouldn't be a lot, but there would still be some there. Because that has been done.
Sure. I have an answer for that. It's a slightly complicated answer, and I'll touch on it. Maybe Jaren can clarify a little bit. We've come to understand that when we look at the sun and the moon and I believe the stars too, on a lesser variable, that you see them relative to your position. So if I'm in New York and someone's in Florida and it's noon, we're not seeing the sun in the same spot in the sky. We're seeing it relative to our own position. Just like if we're both standing on the beach at sunset and the sun is setting, I could see that line of sun, across the water right to my feet, and you could see one across to your feet, but neither of us can see the one going to the other person.
Doesn't that feed into the Earth is traveling around the sun because it's relative to our observation of it, and whereas on here it looks like the sun is going around us because of the relativity? I mean, it falls into there. So why is relativity okay there but not in other places?
Well, go ahead, Jaren, you go.
I was just going to say, because that's, the reality of the situation is 100 people on the beach, each 100 feet away from each other. each one would see the reflection of the sun come to their feet, but none of those 100 people would be able to see any of the other reflections going to anybody else's feet. So does that reflection exist? Well, it does for me because I see it, but for everyone else, they have their own special reflection for them. It doesn't exist. Mine doesn't exist to them. So, the sun kind of manifests the same way through the atmosphere. And, I know that the question was more, I think, about seeing different sides of Saturn, maybe, if you're talking about two ends of the Earth and seeing. And yeah, I have no doubt about that. I think where my questions come in is the size of Saturn, the distance, what it is exactly, as far as, they say it's a gas planet, Jupiter's a gas planet, Mars is a rock planet. Those things have only been told to me by NASA, and there's no way for anyone to double check that other than people who work for NASA or people that, and no astronaut's been there.
Don't forget to give Disney credit. They told you about it also.
They did make a couple films about it.
But tell you the flat Earth debates that you have accepted, I guess, is my question.
Right, you don't believe NASA. So you don't believe NASA. You don't believe the conventional wisdom. Where do your suppositions come from?
Like anything that we can, verify, people can actually double check, which should be part of that scientific method.
Yeah.
And so, yes, can I see Mars through my telescope? Yes. And can somebody else? Yes. Okay, so we can both agree that we can see a red-looking light through a telescope. Now, when NASA shows us a big, beautiful sphere and with mountains and hills and things like that, there's nobody who can go verify that. Now, does it match what we both see? Of course it does. Otherwise, what good is the deception? They couldn't pull that off. But by making sure that whatever they show us matches to some degree our human observations, then I might agree that that's what I see, and the other guy's going to agree, yeah, I also see the planet Mars. But I feel like there's not enough secondary confirmation of those things to tell me distances. And so until I can go to Mars and measure it, how can NASA be proven wrong? They can, as long as they make sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And just to be clear, you're saying that they haven't been there, so they can't prove it wrong. Obviously, the mainstream science would say yes, but we have been to the moon, and can prove some of your supposition wrong there. And what would your response to that be?
Well, who else has gone to the moon to confirm that NASA's gone there? What I'm saying is let's pretend that this was going to be a deception. What you would need to make sure is that anything that you did in space matched the Earth-bound observations. So I look through my telescope, I can see the moon. Somebody else does, they see the same thing. So if NASA puts on a production to where they look like they're landing on something that looks like what we both see through our telescope, they can do a pretty good job deceiving us, because neither I nor the guy looking through his telescope across town, we can't go and verify what they're saying they're doing. So until somebody can also go and can also back up these things, we're dependent on a space agency to tell us all these things. And yes, I know that there's Roscosmos and JAXA and all these other places that supposedly some of them have gone to the moon, but many of their images don't look anything alike. And it just seems like that's not good enough confirmation when you're talking to multiple government agencies.
Now, Greg, you have taught astronomy in college. Do you have any thoughts on this?
A few. So here's the thing. So what you guys are saying that, I want to go back to where David was talking about when he was saying that if you look through a telescope, all you see is lights. And sometimes you can see things like you can see maybe a disk on the moon or like the disk of the moon or the disk of Mars or Saturn or something like that. You can also look at places like Venus and the sun, and you could look at all these everything. Really, if you look any farther out than Neptune, like anything farther out than that, it's really, really hard to see as an actual object. But when we're talking about Mars and the moon and all that kind of stuff, it's I can see where somebody would say, oh, that's just like a type of projection, or maybe it's just a flat object up there. But one of the really cool things is Galileo, way back 1600s, he went and was the first one to show that Venus itself had phases. right? So it had, it had a full phase, it had a half phase, or first quarter, second quarter, so on and so forth. So you could get, all the different phases of Venus just like you got with the moon. And at the time, it was almost unheard of to say, hey, look, this moves around the sun, because at the time, the Ptolemaic model of the solar system and of the universe in general was very prevalent. It was the model that there are these what they call epicycles and the circles on circles and all that kind of stuff. And when Galileo showed that Venus does have phases, it showed that Venus does move around the sun, not around the Earth, and you were able to see. And he drew these pictures, and he drew these pictures of Venus and of the moon, and all of these different pictures of the way they were to him from what he saw in his own self-built telescopes. So when I hear things like it's this big production by this entity or that entity, I like to go back and I like to look at older generations, people who self-built telescopes and looked for themselves. That's one of the things that we did in astronomy too. We built telescopes and we were able to look at the moon and see the hills and craters and things like that. We did those in class, and it was just a lot of fun.
Let me jump in on that about Venus. What I wanted to say earlier in the show, and I'll say it now, is things can fall into three categories in this discussion. They can fall into works on a ball Earth, works on a flat Earth, or works on both. And as you'll see, nothing falls into the basket of works on a ball where it doesn't also work on a flat. So you're saying Venus has phases. Okay. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I'm going to take your expert opinion that it does have phases. And based on the fact that it has phases, you said that proves that it's orbiting around the sun. Well, on a flat Earth, if the sun and all of the planets are moving around the flat Earth, just like the moon has phases, Venus could have phases too. It doesn't mean that it's what they're telling us. It could be close and small, and the sun, the electricity from the sun, is lighting up lighting up Venus, like I believe that it energizes the moon to become its own light.
Well, it's not so much electricity, but light. It's electromagnetism. But
that's a discussion that we can go back and forth on. I have no problem with that. But the point is, if they are objects going around, rotating around at their different paces, planets were called wandering stars back in the day. They appear to be no different than the stars, except that they're wandering at different speeds. So they can have phases over flat Earth. So,
all right. Well, let's stay on that discussion.
Okay.
This is a question for Greg, and then David and Jaren. I'd love your response. Greg, when we look at Venus, how do we calculate how far away it is?
Well, a lot of it has to do with triangulation. When we calculate Venus, one of the really funny things, and really I think it's pretty cool, but it's also kind of funny, is that nobody really had an idea how far away Venus was until about the 1700s or so, 1800s, when I forgot exactly who it was, but they ended up sending a ship down to the southern hemisphere, and they when they sent the ship out there, they said, hey, we want to get a picture of the Venus transit of the sun. So what they did is they calculated out how long it took Venus to move around or move from one side of the sun to the other side of the sun, and then from there you're able to calculate just how fast Venus was moving. And by calculating that, and knowing how wide the sun was and how far away you are from the sun, you can figure out how fast Venus, or how far away Venus is moving from the sun. But yes, I do admit that you have to do some approximations because it's not perfect. You have to approximate it as a circle and kind of simplify it that way. But after centuries of observations, a lot of people have kind of narrowed it down to how far away it is. But that's kind of the general idea.
And do we use any technology now? One way or the other, whether it be on Earth or be a satellite, to help gauge those distances, whether it be Venus or any other planetary body?
Kind of, I guess. Right now not right now, but there was a probe that was sent to Venus, and I think it's it was the one that went around Mercury. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but they sent a probe out there to Venus to go study the surface. And when they did that, they included a radar altimeter, and they, looked at all the different, peaks and valleys and everything on Venus. But as for things like, lasers or, shooting radar to it and then back to us, you can do that. But it's probably a little bit easier to just use, Newton's laws of gravity and then, trying to get as accurate as humanly possible. But of course, here's the thing: is that on a scale of the solar system, you can be within a few 10,000 miles and still be really accurate.
Right. So, okay, we were talking about this started in the 1600s, the 1700s. They were figuring out that the Earth they thought was a globe or a ball, and how far away Venus was. And I guess for David and Jaron, my question is, if the Earth is flat and it's been something that has been blocked from us, it has to have gone back hundreds of years. Like, when did the conspiracy start, and who's propagated it that whole time, and why?
I'll answer that. To me, I think that they originally thought that it was a ball because they observed from their perspective boats going over the curve. They saw them disappear and they got scared and said, those people disappeared. And then they'd come back and they said, where the hell did you go? And they said, we just went that way. And they said, oh, we saw you disappear. So you must have gone over a ball. And then from there, they started to embrace that idea and move on from there. And then I think at some point science looked, and when we had better optics, when we had telescopes, when we had more powerful zoom lenses on cameras. So I can't tell you when that would have been, but if they would have realized that they were wrong, they would have had to hide that fact because they were so confident and rightfully so. I thank science for getting us out of the control of the Catholic Church. I think they saw it and said, if we admit that we were wrong about this, then we will lose our grasp, and it's better to tell this one lie and continue the movement of science than to admit that we were wrong and possibly lose the whole enterprise altogether.
So you were talking about gravity before, and do you not believe in gravity at all? Like, it's not, like when you go in your bathroom and you step on the scale, what is that? I guess is my question.
Well, that'd be weight. I mean, gravity comes from gravitas, which means weight. It's simply your anything that weighs more than the air around it falls down. So if you're talking about that as gravity, absolutely, I believe in gravity. And if you're talking about gravity that causes the moon to fall towards the Earth, no, I don't think that is. There's no evidence that the moon is falling to the Earth to me or missing the curvature. And so, no, gravity to me, as far as it pulling to the center of the ball, no, I think gravity pulls to the Earth. And so,
here's a question for everybody involved. I keep hearing the term when we're talking about what I thought were orbits. You keep saying falling. I thought these were stable orbits.
They are.
Well, the story of the moon, for example, is it's flying through space, but the Earth is pulling it down, and as it pulls it down, its speed is matching the curve of the Earth. So it's falling, but it's not getting any closer to the Earth, and it keeps missing the Earth. Same with all the planets.
Wouldn't that be an orbit?
Well, that's what they call an orbit, but that's not. We don't believe that at all. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that you have, I don't know how.
Why doesn't that make sense? I guess is what I'm saying.
Because you have, the sun is able to hold on to all of the planets. The planets are able to hold on to all of their moons. There's all these moons, and they're all able to whiz around each other, and they never screw each other up. They always maintain, the perfect orbit.
Well, here's my limited. I am not an astrophysicist. But like my limited understanding, and so enlighten me, my limited understanding is you've got a big body and a small body around it. And the gravity, assuming you believe in gravity, the gravity of the big body pulls the small body in and into a stable orbit around it. And then even the bigger body, being the sun, pulls our larger bodies, being like the Earth, to a larger orbit around that. But the sun isn't going to pull the Earth because the Earth, isn't going to pull the moon because the moon is so much closer to another large body, being the Earth. That's my understanding of the way those things work. Before David and Jaron react to that, Greg, is my understanding correct, or am I saying things wrong?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. It's that the Earth and Moon system is so incredibly far away from the sun that the sun's pull on the Earth and the sun's pull on the moon is I don't want to say it's zero, because it's not. Otherwise, the Earth would just fly off into space. But it's that it's so small that the Earth and the moon system are pretty much the only two in that system. That's why two-body problems are super easy, because it's just two bodies. That's all you have to deal with. But but like what David was talking about, when you get into three-body problems, it gets way more complicated. But if you stretch out their distances far enough apart, then you can treat them as simply two-body problems, because the Earth and the moon distance, which is like 250,000 miles, is nothing compared to the 90 million miles between the Earth and the sun. So it's basically, you can treat that as nothing compared to the 90 million that is between the Earth and the sun. So yeah, it's that the moon is so close to the Earth that the Earth's influence on it is way, way, way bigger than the sun's influence on the moon.
So can I kind of swing the topic a little off about?
Well, before you swing the topic, I'd love to hear the reaction to that.
Jaron, why don't you take it?
Sure. So basically your idea of gravity is one that can exist, I guess, if you're talking about picking it up from current times and you're saying, well, this is what they're doing, and so we're applying a force that must do that. But to say that force initiated those things, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you go on a parabolic flight and you drop a bunch of ping pong balls in there, they don't accumulate into a sphere and then other spheres start in orbit of those spheres. You've basically looked at what's going on and said, okay, well, we know what's going on now, and so this is the action that they're all doing. Well, there's a lot of things that can explain that, but I don't think that they are necessarily just a fact. So when we say things like, oh, this is going around this and we're going around the sun, really, if the sun is pulling us, how are we ever going away from the sun? When we're coming around the orbit, it's pulling us. Here comes the Earth. We're being pulled, and then we go around the side of it, and it goes. Now we're going away from it. Now we're going, where's the pull?
Isn't that just easily observable through physics? I mean, you have to, if you don't believe that, that would be a science denier or a physics denier, because those are easy calculations we've been taught to look at.
Yeah, those are calculable.
Yeah. Right, that's what I'm saying.
Why have you chosen not to believe that when it's something that we've had for hundreds and hundreds of years? And I guess, and Adam and Tack, and why have you chosen to believe them? Is the question. Like, why do you see yourself as a science denier of things that we've been taught is easily figurable?
I don't on this particular call, I don't necessarily think either of these two gentlemen that are flat earth theorists disbelieve. I think it's more that there's too much room for disproof of current theories. That's what it sounds like. You guys sound very well educated, and I'll be honest, I'm impressed with some of the angles that you're taking. So I don't necessarily think I just think that they don't believe in it. I think that there's just too many holes in some of these theories for them to accept it and to believe it.
Just think about this for a moment. The Earth is orbiting around the sun at around 66,000 miles per hour, while the sun is shooting through the galaxy somewhere between 400 and 700,000 miles an hour. So we're doing this corkscrew, keeping up with the equator of the sun, we'll call it. And all of the other planets, all of their sizes and distance, are doing the same thing. They're all maintaining a flat plane, chasing this rocketing sun through the universe, through the galaxy. But our stars never change. The constellations
change over time.
Hold on, that's what you're told. Hold on.
No, that's
hold on. The constellations are.
Hold on. We know these are calculable things. We know that the constellations are moving.
So,
and if you believe in gravity, if you believe in gravity, which you guys don't, that is why we're a corkscrew spinning around and moving around from one another. So if somewhere you've just decided, I'm guessing that I don't believe.
Well, it's what it is denying the math. We went back. We started with the scientific method. What's our hypothesis, and can you test it, and can you repeat the test? On the traditional science side, those tests have been run over and over again, and they believe they've come to a conclusion. What tests have you run? What leads you to not believe the math?
Well, because if I were to tell you that I have $4 million in my bank account and I have to pay $2 million tomorrow, and then I'm going to pay $1 million the day after. Then I could, the math will tell you that I have $1 million in my bank account. Now I don't have anything. I don't have $1,000 in my bank account. So the math is correct. The math is true, but it doesn't mean that that's reality. Math is a great job. Does a great job. It's a language. It is a human invention that is like a language. It describes things more exact than my language can. I can't really describe things with my words as well as math can, right? So I don't disbelieve the math. What?
What's the payoff, or who is it benefiting for the lie other than propagating the lie?
Oh man, the space industry alone is something like $300 billion a year. So I would say that's a pretty good. Good thing.
That's just the beginning, and I don't believe that they get $300 billion a year. It's more about control.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't, what proof do you have that they don't get that?
Because look at the quality of work that they put out. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. If you really want to do that, go to Jaren's channel, Jeranism, on YouTube, and watch his NASA videos. It's not something that we can describe in an audio podcast in 90 minutes or so. I mean, take the time, watch the analysis, the scientific method that Jeren uses in his videos, and you will see that, photos in space are being faked, and stuff on the ISS is being faked. It's been proven, but you have to look at the evidence.
I love the passion. My God.
I do too. That's
amazing. All right, so let me ask, can I bring it back down to Earth for a minute? Brent, are you okay with that?
Okay. We've always been on Earth. Go ahead.
Well, so there's it's easy to draw the conspiracy into what our field of vision is. Okay, I got that. What we can see in the night sky, what we can see in the daytime, what we can see, whenever. I want to take it back down to Earth for just a minute. So we live on the Space Coast in Florida, maybe one of the most active areas in the world for hurricanes and tropical storms. What makes, in a flat Earth theory, what makes the very basic concept of something that's repeatable here on Earth for any science lab anywhere, the Coriolis effect that affects the spin of the hurricanes, different in the two hemispheres to you guys? What affects that?
Jeren, you first.
Well, the sun and moon, the sun and moon orbit above the Earth in a clockwise fashion. That's where they get the clock from. That's how they figured out how to make a watch that goes on your wrist. It's shaped exactly like the Earth, and the sun does the exact same thing. And if you look at that orbit, anything on the outside of the orbit, being the left, being the southern hemisphere, curves off in that direction, which way we looking here?
Counterclockwise.
Right, and so that's how each of those motions comes from.
What's playing that then? What's making that motion occur?
So the motion of the heavens, and I think that's even a known thing, right? That even from like a geocentric point of view, since things are relative, if there is a force on Earth that is seen by us, it can be a cause of either one. Either we are moving through the universe, or the universe is moving around us. Either one would cause the same fictitious forces on Earth.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, what you said was basically that the Coriolis effect, which I believe and some of my other friends and fellow thinkers believe, that we believe to be occurring by the force of gravity and the Earth's spin, you're blaming on the force in the heavens? I'm not insultingly asking you that. I just want to understand.
Correct. The movement of what's above us.
Right. So here's the way I look at it. I call it the wake of the moon and the sun. But let's just focus on the moon. That if the moon and the sun and the earth are electrical, like I believe, that they have a wake. As they move across our oceans, they push. Like if you put your hand in a tub or a paddle in the water and pushed it, you get the Coriolis effect. You get opposite spinning vortices on each side of the paddle. So you won't see those spinning storms in between the tropics. You see them mostly on the outside. You don't see them right on the equator. They spin outside of the wake of the moon and the sun.
All right. You answered it. You gave me your perspective. It's hard to understand because you guys are saying that there's no gravitational force that's being implied by these visions that are in the sky. It's hard for me to grasp that.
Well,
blaming the cost of.
Yeah, we don't know if the things in the sky are physical. When Jeren says there's no gravity, there's buoyancy and density. There is a force that holds us down. It's some sort of electromagnetic static force that can be demonstrated. There's lots of things that will demonstrate that. You'll see dust sticking to a television tube, an old television, that, they're not metal, and it does get pulled to it. There's all sorts of forces that way. Maglev trains are defying electromagnetism, for lack of a better word. They're not defying gravity. These things are explanations that could work. I don't know the exact answer of how it works.
You said you think that the sun is electrical. Do you think it's like just a light, like it's, for lack of a better word, man-made, or is it?
I think the sun is the source of all life, which science will tell us that it is. The sun. Without the sun, we would not be here. Plants would not be living. We would not be living. It is the energy that powers the planet. Some people say that the Earth is a giant battery where the center North Pole is the positive and the outer ring that we call Antarctica is the negative, and the salt oceans are the electrical fluid in between. And that's how Tesla was able to pull free energy out of the Earth and transmit it worldwide.
That's an awesome theory, especially to tie in Tesla's theories as well. That's an awesome. I like that one. That's a good one.
Hey,
we just did an episode on Tesla. You say he was able to broadcast it worldwide.
Well, he was able to transmit electricity free, pulling it out of the Earth. But when J.P. Morgan and Westinghouse heard that, they said, "Well, how can you meter this and charge people for it?" And he said, "You can't," and that was the end of Tesla.
Well, he built Wardenclyffe in Long Island. Was there another tower somewhere?
That's where he did it, and that's where he demonstrated it.
But where was the power picked up?
They were pulling it. They were transmitted. They lit up the World's Fair wirelessly with his free electricity.
That was 8 years later. Wardenclyffe was 1901. World's Fair was 1893.
So I'm getting my. I know that it was Tesla did it. I don't know where exactly it was. I'd have to go back and look at the research. Maybe Jaron knows. But before we go down the Tesla rabbit hole, I just wanted to ask you guys.
I was just responding to what you said.
Yeah, no problem. This conversation can go in so many directions, and if we had 9 hours, we wouldn't get through any of it. The question I have is: the Earth is spinning. The atmosphere is velcroed by gravity to the Earth, spinning with the Earth, even though there's air currents going in different directions at different levels. And then the vacuum of space, if the space station or a spaceship got a hole in it, it would suck all the air out and everybody would die. The question is, why doesn't space suck the atmosphere off of the spinning planet?
Greg, why don't you pick up there?
It's gravity.
Okay. So let me answer that. Well,
let Greg finish before you throw your addendum on there.
No problem. Sorry.
So one really cool thing, it's pressure, right? So the whole reason why water boils at a lower temperature at higher altitudes, and the whole reason why you're able to suck drinks through a straw, or why if you have an open air hatch on the ISS, you're going to get sucked out, is because the pressure of it's the weight of the air. So the air is, I think we can all agree that the air is made of stuff, right? It's made of particles and molecules, and so the weight of every single one of those particles added together does cause a pushing force downwards, because the gravity from the Earth is pulling down. And so when you have a vacuum like in your house, or when you suck on a straw, what happens is you decrease the pressure inside your body or inside the vacuum or something like that. You decrease the pressure, and the pressure differential is the weight of the atmosphere pushes the liquid down up into the straw, into your mouth, or up through the hose into your vacuum. And so the reason why nothing gets sucked off of the Earth or anything like that is because the weight of the air has nothing to push the air into. So it's the weight of the air is pulling down at the same amount on all sides of it. So because there's no pressure differential up here. But if you were to get a giant hose or something like that, then sure, you could probably get the air to push up a little bit on the hose, but it's not going to push down up into nothing because there's nothing for it to go into. There's nothing for that.
That's why they say Mars lost its atmosphere, because it was just too small. It was smaller than Earth, and it has so much less mass that it couldn't hold an atmosphere.
Kind of.
So you're saying that the gravitons, or whatever gravity is holding the air down, and even though the space is the all-powerful vacuum, it's unable to pull the air up into its vacuum. Imagine the space being the inside of your mouth when you're sucking on a straw, but the minor, tiny little vacuum that we can make with our lungs will pull water up off the ground, away from gravity, will pull air up away. It makes no sense. If I got a bottle, a liter bottle, and I sucked some of the air out and put the top on it real quick, I would call that a lesser vacuum than space. But I can take that up to any altitude, or even down into the water or anywhere, poke a hole in the bottom, and it will pull air or water right away from gravity. So, your argument, I don't think it holds any water.
But
respectfully,
that's good. Nice one.
Nice one. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Let's say, have you ever been on a plane before?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, have you ever had like a shampoo bottle or anything like that just randomly explode in your luggage? Because I've had that happen a couple times.
No, they took it away. TSA took it.
I had that happen.
Yeah,
it was a bottle.
right.
It was a bottle of salsa from Mexico.
Now
Yeah.
at the airport.
No, of course.
At the airports, they say, nope, you can't do that.
As you go up, the air pressure decreases.
Right. It was in my checked luggage.
The pressure decreases because there's less air pushing down on you at that particular altitude, and so as you go farther down, there's more and more air. So yeah, it's the pressure is going to increase down here. And so it doesn't cause all that. It doesn't require that much of a pressure differential to then suck something up a hose. But if you were to go up into, I don't know, let's say you're up at 50,000 feet or something like that, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit harder to suck drinks from a straw or anything like that. But it's all about that pressure differential. It's all about the fact that the weight of the atmosphere is pushing down in all locations at the same time at the same amount, and when I mean the same amount, it's on the surface. I'm not talking like altitude wise, but it's all about the fact that there's more stuff pulling down on you, and so it's easier down here at the surface than it is up there.
Go ahead, Jaron. But I respectfully disagree with that explanation. Go ahead, Jaron.
Well, I would ask the question then, if you're saying that all the air is pushing down on the Earth at the equal weight, it all weighs the same, how does the air choose to travel with the Earth at its various locations? So at the equator, the air has to move 1,000 miles per hour to the east, and at Florida, it's about 700 miles per hour, and at Alaska, it's 400 miles per hour. And all the air, all the atmosphere, travels the exact same speed as the Earth. So if it's what you described, this weight of the atmosphere above, when does it choose, or how does it choose, even at 30,000 feet, 50,000 feet, to move at the exact same speed as the ground below it?
Well, that's the thing, it doesn't. So if you have you ever been to anywhere at all and seen that, oh hey, here the wind pushes from west to east. Like I'm here in central Illinois and the wind pushes west to east and south to north most of the time. But sometimes sometimes the wind comes in from the east, other times it comes in from the north. And so it's not all moving at the exact same rate at all at the exact same time. But if you're referring to why does it move with the earth, is because gravity from the earth is pulling down on it. So it's basically a giant ball. The atmosphere itself is actually very, very, very thin. And there's like, if you come at it from a larger perspective from outer space or anything like that, you can see that there's a very thin veil of atmosphere. And so on the scale of the planet itself, it's not a whole lot. But from our perspective, yeah, sure, there's a lot of atmosphere. And so when the Earth is moving around, some of the air does move faster than the rotation rate of the Earth. Other times it moves slower, and that's where Adam and Tack were talking about, where it was it's the Coriolis effect, and that's where we get the easterlies and the westerlies and all that kind of stuff. And it does change speeds at various various latitudes around Earth.
Yeah, kind of like if you're sitting at home wherever you are and you're used to watching the Weather Channel radar, and if where you live you always see the storms move east to west, every now and then you get that crazy belt of rain that comes west to east. You're like, what is happening?
Yep.
Right. But Jaron and David, that brings me to a larger question. One thing that you do a good job of. That you point what you find to be holes in the arguments. So we find you pointing at that, and your answer generally is that doesn't make sense to me. Okay, obviously the retort to that would be, well, according to physics and science, it does make sense whether you understand it or not. Well, my question would be, other than it not making sense to you, are there definable axioms that you found that can prove some of these things that you claim?
Sure, they've done tests, launching cannonballs straight up in the air, and the cannonball comes down and lands within 3 feet of the cannon, or sometimes back in the same hole. So, that's a test that tells me, that you would describe that as the air is moving with, but you just said that, no, it's always going different ways and it doesn't move the same. But if we're talking about on the equator, well, there is a 1,000-mile-per-hour atmospherical, it's moving that fast, correct?
Well, if we were doing that scientifically, we couldn't make it that simple. Obviously, we'd have to account for the wind on that very day, the exact angle. There are probably 40 different variables that I'm not thinking of naming right now that you would have to account for to do that test in the scientific method that we started this discussion with.
Right.
So just saying, well, it shot up and came back down, like, give me more than that.
So I guess rephrase your question. Are you asking about this specific example, or you're opening it up now to anything?
I'm trying to so far in our discussion, most of the feedback that we've received from you when we ask these questions has been, that doesn't make sense to me, or, well, it just wouldn't work that way, or I don't believe it. What I'm saying is that on the other side of the argument is not just I don't believe it, but it's like here are numerous tests and examples and experiments that to the non-flat Earth mind prove the other side. What I'm asking is, can you give some examples of, and it doesn't have to be limited to the one thing that we're talking about right now.
Okay. Some
tests and examples that prove your side of the coin.
Sure, Jaron, you go first.
Yeah, well, I would say that when the way that science describes something and tells me that's the way it works, and then I come and say that doesn't make sense to me, well, that is kind of what we're saying, is that you've already described the action. For instance, let's just talk about
that's how we progress.
Yeah, let's talk
civilization.
Huh?
Like question. That's how we progress. We question things and try to understand them and make them better. Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what we're doing when we question science. When we say that we don't agree with something, that's the nature of science, is trying to debunk whatever the current going facts are, whatever the truth is. You want to try and up that by one to get closer to the truth. So my question would be, with the easterly winds, that we have the jet streams, how does the Earth traveling in that direction cause winds to go in that direction? So when I'm saying that, because that's something we know is testable. So you've already described for me what happens. We see what happens. But a test would be, okay, that happens. So how does that happen on a ball spinning through space? Why is there the easterly jet streams, which are the prevailing jet streams?
Well, once again, you're throwing in the question, but you haven't provided the answer. My question.
The answer is that's what takes place. So my test, the answer is that's what takes place. That's what is reality. I think we would all agree that the reality is that there's easterly jet streams, which are the prevailing. That's why if I fly to New York, it takes me less time than when I fly this way, because the winds go that way. So, but the ball spins that way. So I'm saying that is a testable thing. We can say I just did that test and that the easterly winds do blow east. You tell me we live on a ball spinning east, so I'm just asking, how is that possible?
I have an answer just in general, but before I do that, I want to hear Greg's thought on that, and then Adam and Tack's thought on that.
Okay, sorry. What was the question again? I was having a hard time kind of following that.
Easterly winds and trade winds. How do they travel if the Earth's spinning one way? How do they spin the same way at like 1,000 miles an hour on the equator?
Simplified version. Coriolis factor, the Coriolis force.
This is a result of the spinning ball, right?
Right. It's the fact that the Earth is spinning is what's causing the easterlies and the westerly trade winds and all of that kind of stuff. It's the fact that the Earth is spinning around in a ball or on a ball.
The wind goes the same direction. So the easterly winds, which can get up to 150, 200 miles per hour, those go east. But the ball is spinning east. So why would that? How could that exist?
What he's saying is the Earth is spinning, and in the same direction, the winds are outrunning the spinning Earth. So on the equator, the Earth is spinning 1,040 miles per hour, but the winds are outrunning the Earth. How does that happen?
Gotcha. Okay, I see what you're doing. So it's again, to do this the oversimplified version. It's the Coriolis force, but the Coriolis force basically, if you're looking on a spherical, if you see an object being a sphere and you have it spinning around, the Coriolis force is basically a change in a perceived force direction. So the whole idea is that if you were to throw or shoot a ball or something like that from the equator up to the North Pole and just kind of throw it straight, then from your perspective, you would see the ball kind of shift one way or the other, because as it got closer and closer, it traveled a smaller distance.
Correct.
Based on the fact that the spinning.
That is north. That is north and south, though. That is north and south. We're talking straight east, the direction that the Earth is spinning. That's not Coriolis. Isn't the simple answer that gravity reduces as you get higher? So the closer you are to the Earth, the less effect it's going to have on the winds. The higher you get up, it does get crazy.
And the trade winds are only in low atmosphere.
Right. So he's talking about the jet stream now, not the trade winds or anything like that.
Well, I'm talking about the jet stream.
Okay, that's density. That's just a density problem. It's the fact that up there, the atmosphere is not very dense, and because of that, it can travel a hell of a lot faster than the winds down here.
So one more time, the jet streams travel faster than the Earth spins,
right,
towards the east, and you're saying that is a result of the spin. But that's what we're saying. It doesn't make sense. Is that it's the equivalent of me answering every question you ask us with atmospheric undulation, and just describing things with a phenomenon, and then asking you how that works, and you saying it works because of atmospheric undulation. That's not.
It's because to describe the Coriolis effect, we have to go into, classical mechanics, partial differential equations, and we have to dive deep down the physics rabbit hole, which I don't think we kind of want to do. It's I could show you guys the equations, but it's not conducive to radio talk.
Right.
I think what he's saying is it's testable and provable based on both the equations and simply using we can go there, and so we do have instruments to measure the speed of all of these things.
That's correct. That's why I'm using that as my evidence. I'm saying
how does that play into Earth being flat?
How does it? Because there's problems with the ball model spinning. Number one being that it's never been tested to spin, never been shown to spin. That's a problem. And that the whole idea of the spinning Earth doesn't meet nobody, hold on a second, nobody who's ever been on this Earth, 100 billion people, nobody has ever...
Let's not jump over. You made a statement. How's it never been tested to spin or shown to spin?
It has been tested.
It has been tested and shown to spin. So we don't want to just jump over those bold statements.
When has that been done?
Why do you think that it hasn't? Like, I don't know. We have geosynchronous. We have to put things into geosynchronous orbit, otherwise the Earth is spinning and it moves out of.
Because there's. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump in and saying you say we have to put things in geosynchronous orbit. That's not proof because we don't have proof that things are in geosynchronous orbit. There's been numerous tests that have been tested to prove that the Earth is spinning, and they've all failed to prove that, and some of them have proved that the Earth is still. Jaron can name all of those tests.
Well, there's Aries failure, which was meant to show our movement. I mean, was meant to show that starlight coming through. You know, that's the one I'm sure you've heard. He filled the telescope with water and said, okay, well, if the Earth is moving, then the starlight coming into the water is going to be slowed down versus the telescope with air. And the reason they call it Aries failure is because it failed to prove that the Earth spins. Michelson-Morley's experiment. Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, I've come to the conclusion that there's no experiment that can show the Earth to move. That's an Einstein quote.
But Einstein said a lot of things and then recanted a lot of them. But let's move on beyond that. Adam and Tack, you guys just heard some of that feedback. Give us your thoughts and questions that you might have based on that.
All right, so let's go on the first part of it. So nobody's brought into effect anything about centripetal motion and centripetal effect that happens with a spherical model as well. So that could affect the trade winds. And I want to kind of clarify something that not necessarily trade winds, but the jet stream too. The jet stream does not spin faster or does not move faster than the rotation of the Earth. It moves, but it moves with relativity to the surface that it's moving across the planet. So if you a jet stream traveling at 200 miles an hour, I know that's a bit fast. However, if you've got that, its motion is relative to the ground, so it's traveling at 200 miles an hour. If the Earth is rotating at 800 miles per hour or whatever the revolution time is, then it's not traveling faster than the 800 mile an hour Earth surface movement at its crust.
Correct, but okay.
I'm just answering some of the.
That's good answer. I mean, the whole thing is what we're saying is that we agree with that. If that's the round ball model that we're taking, so then you're saying that spin is what causes those winds.
What contributes to it? Yes.
Huh?
What contributes to it? Yes.
Okay, so the wind that's blowing 200 miles per hour towards the east at the equator, you're saying that the spin that is at a spin zero relative to the Earth is what's causing the 200 miles per hour going towards the east.
What is contributing to it? Yes, not the only cause.
It's not the only cause, but it's a big factor, yeah.
Gotcha.
So what causes the spin, or I'm sorry, what causes the winds on the flat Earth?
Pressure differentials.
Yeah, a combination of pressure and density of the air.
Well, I mean, give us a little bit more than that.
So
okay, sorry, you go ahead.
Well, if you want to answer that, I just want to kind of keep it on the same subject and of the spinning of the Earth, and ask you guys another question: how something works.
Well, no, you can ask, but let's finish the topic we're on. I was saying, give us a little bit more on what causes that on the flat Earth.
Well, if the sun and moon are orbiting in a clockwise formation, then that would create winds in the easterly direction.
Why would that create winds?
Because they're moving.
The heavens do.
Okay.
Well, I mean. Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the funny thing is, you can laugh at that, but then when you say
what force? I'm asking what force. You don't believe in gravity. What force is causing?
I do believe in gravity. There's something, like I said, something is pulling us down. When anything with weight drops, right? If a pencil weighs more than air around it, it falls. So, I mean, I guess my question would be, how does
the force of gravity is making those things happen on the flat Earth? Is that what you're saying?
Sure. If you want to call it gravity, is what I'm saying.
Well, we got to call it something.
But the force isn't caused by the mass of a ball. You can call it gravity, but it's not caused by the mass of a ball.
What's it caused by?
We're told that the mass of the ball, everything is attracted to the very center of the ball. But a point Jaron brings up a lot is, what if you were a point halfway between the center and the surface of that ball? How do you know you're not the center? And isn't that pulling everything towards it?
David, I'm no longer trying to disprove that. I'm trying to prove what you're saying. If it's not the center of the ball, but it is gravity, what causes it? I'm just asking you that question.
Any item weighing more than the area that it occupies. So that's why a helium balloon works. So my question would be, how does a helium balloon rise in a ball Earth with gravity as you understand it? Because it's a mass. It's a mass. It has mass, and it weighs more.
Surrounding air. That's all. It's lighter than the surrounding air.
Okay, so you just described my exact definition of gravity. So I thought that gravity was two items with mass pulling together, or that the gravity of the Earth should be pulling the helium balloon down. And
But it does.
You just said it.
No, it does, but it's the buoyant force that's caused by the density difference is what is more than the gravity pulling down on the helium. That's why helium just is so rare here on Earth. But we're
in agreement on buoyancy and density and stuff. We're just in disagreement on what gravity is. You guys think it's caused by the mass of a ball, and we don't. We can argue all day, but it falls into the works on a flat Earth, works on a ball Earth.
No one's arguing. We're asking for your definition of gravity
and what causes it.
Well, anything that weighs more than its surrounding area. So dirt and dust and rocks and all that stuff weighs more than air, so it's at the bottom. And water weighs more, so it's at the bottom. And as you work your way up, you get everything that weighs less than that. And then when you get to become air, then there's only a few things that are lighter than air, like helium, like hydrogen, and then you've got the complete Earth set up. Anything that weighs more than the area it occupies goes down. That's because it weighs more than how else could the universe organize itself?
So I got a question for that. What about the flat Earth? Are we falling?
No, because the Earth is all there is. So to be falling, you'd have to be falling in something.
What's under the flat Earth?
No, the Earth is all there is. It's
a wall.
It's the equivalent of asking you what's below space. What's under space? You would just say, "Oh, well, space is endless." Well, I don't think anything is endless. That's actually impossible. There's no such thing as infinity, because I could just say, "Well, what about +1?" So there's no infinity.
Okay, but to me, when the Earth ends, space begins, and then that goes on for the rest of the universe. And if there's more universes, that's a whole other discussion for another day. But in our view of the world, obviously, the Earth ends, and then infinite space begins. Are you saying? I guess what I'd ask is,
I'll say the Earth goes on until it goes on for as far as we know, and so what's beyond that is for another day. It's the same.
So there's Earth for a certain. There's rock and mud and everything else, and then that stops, and you don't know what's beyond that. Is what you're saying?
Correct, because we've only drilled 8 miles is the most any humans ever drilled into the Earth. So I'm assuming that
Do you believe that the North Pole, as you've said before, is the center, and then the South Pole actually circles us? So do you believe in the ice wall, or is that something that's tangible? Can we get to it and we're just not allowed to?
Everybody's got different.
You do that?
Yeah, there's differing opinion. I can't really say because I've never been there, but I would tell you that there is a wall that is the ice shelf where water is held into the kind of let's call it a lake that the Earth resides in, where all the little continent land masses are. And then there's Antarctica, which certainly seems like it's a frozen tundra, and certainly appears that the further you go away from it, the colder and more impossible it would be to operate any machinery or any plane or any ATV. So if there's something beyond that, which some people think that there is, I've never seen it, so I can't, it would be incorrect of me to say that those things exist.
What do you guys theorize is past that wall? Because that's fascinating to me. I just that there is something past that. If that's the base behind it.
Jaron said that we've never been there, so it would just be theorizing. But clearly theorizing, there may be nothing. It may just be the end. It might just be cold, dark, and frozen, and that's impenetrable to humans. Or perhaps there are other thermal pockets out there, maybe 5, 10, 100,000 miles away, or even closer. So as you go through that darkness, there's another sun. A small local sun orbiting, making another thermal pocket, and that's where, if you believe in extraterrestrials, they come from the extra territory beyond the shoreline of Antarctica. If you just Google Antarctic ice wall, you'll see thousands of pictures of a wall of ice, which is the shoreline of Antarctica. I don't know if it's a wall all the way around. It's certainly not like a wall in Game of Thrones that throws people off. It's the shoreline of the ice tundra that we call Antarctica. Antarctica, and there could,
Oh, and it's back in July, and I can't wait.
yeah, there you go.
Hey, I got another question for you about the flat earthers. One of the things lately, and I don't know if
I'm losing you.
We can barely hear you, but I wanted to just stay on the spinning ball. You said I could ask a question when we're done with that.
Yeah.
So and I'll try to make this quick, and you guys can just give me your answer and then let me retort quick. If you're on an airport on the equator and you're spinning 1,040 miles per hour, we'll just call it 1,000 miles per hour, and you're going to fly to the east, the Earth is spinning to the east at 1,000 miles per hour. So when you're on the runway standing still, you are relative to the Earth moving at 0 miles per hour, and relative to a point in space moving 1,000 miles per hour. Does everybody agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. So we get out, we take off on our plane, we're heading east, we accelerate to 500 miles per hour. According to a point in space, we're going 1,500 miles an hour, but land speed is 500 miles per hour. Everybody's on board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure. I
So
feel like this is fishing, but yes. I'm on board.
well, no, I'm not fishing. It's literally, I'm just setting it up so people can visualize, because it's things that people don't think of. So, as you get closer to the North Pole, or we'll go with the North Pole, the closer you are to that, the slower you are going. You're still spinning 365 degrees every 24 hours, but if you're in Alaska, you're only going about 400 miles per hour to make that full circle around the axis of the Earth. Everybody on board?
In relative approximation to a point in space is what you're saying, right?
Correct.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so I'm on a runway in Alaska now, and I'm traveling 400 miles per hour. I take off, I fly down to the equator, and I turn east. I'm now only going 400 miles per hour. How do I catch up to the Earth? With 400 miles per hour, I had my initial speed. Before I took off, I sped up to 500 miles per hour. Add those together, I'm going 900 miles per hour at best. But when I'm heading east at the equator, how do I catch up to the Earth? It's spinning up 100 miles faster than I'm going if I can maintain all of those speeds.
It's all relative. Every single moment that you move in that aircraft, your object of relativity with the surface of the Earth changes. So as you're closer to the equator, your relativity is different than it is at the pole.
Because the entire time you're a slave to the gravity of the Earth.
So the Earth gravity is speeding me up as I'm going towards the equator, and then as I pass the equator, it slows me down.
In relativity to a fixed point in space. Yes.
Okay, that's your belief. I have my belief. No, I got you there. It just I'm not saying that I got you. It just you never sense any of these things. If you're flying an airplane, you're cruising along for 5-6 hours. It's smooth as can be. You're flying level. As soon as they start, nosing down, you know it immediately that you're heading down towards the airport. But at flying at 500 miles per hour, according on a 24,000 mile approximate ball Earth, the plane would have to nose down 2 miles every minute. Otherwise, it would just fly off into space.
Hold on. You said that you're using the way you feel on an airplane as a gauge. To go back to what you're saying, why don't you feel the fact that you're traveling at 500 miles an hour in your example?
Well, you do. You feel the acceleration when you get up to that speed. When you get up to that speed, you feel it, but you're traveling with it. All the air is moving with you. I'm with you. But any change, if you're flying level, is the air curved also? Is that, how does the plane maintain its level flight path if the Earth is tilting away from us?
The same way water is level at its surface, the exact same way.
All right, so let's just jump over there for a second. Water, you believe water? Yeah, no, you believe water curves. There's a salt flat in there's geographically flat areas of the world. For people that believe we live on a ball, they do agree that there are areas that are geographically flat, like the salt flats in Bolivia, and when it rains, they get covered with water, and it's within like a foot difference. For Jaron, how far is it? 200 miles, 300 miles?
I know that lake is, but the salt flats are like one something.
Okay, 100 some odd miles, and the water it's not curved. The salt flat doesn't come up out of the water. And over 100 miles, how many feet is that? 100 miles, Jaron? Is it
Of curvature?
Of curvature on a ball Earth.
I could figure it out quickly, but I don't know. Let me see. 100 miles.
8,000 inches.
6,000 feet.
6,000 feet of curvature.
108 miles provides 3,000 feet of elevation curvature aperture.
Okay, we'll go with that if you go on both sides, but there's none. You can see it. On a super clear day with a telescope, you can see way farther across that water, and there is no curvature.
Sure. Can I answer that?
Sure, please.
One of the easiest things about the Bolivian salt flats specifically, I've been there. I worked with the Department of State Bureau for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement and got to go all over Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia. It was a blast. But one of the things you aren't considering in this is the heat that's rising from those salt flats during those storms. You've got an immense amount of heat that's rising from those that is absolutely throwing off a visible spectrum during a look through a telescope. Same way that sometimes that happens on the ocean. Same way sometimes that happens looking through the sky using a telescope. You can have things that affect that visual sight that you're getting through your telescope.
Aren't the Bolivian salt flats agreed upon by science that they are geographically flat all the way across within the variance of a foot?
I'd believe you with your conviction and passion about it, but I can't say yes to that.
So again, never believe anything I say. Check it that they are geographically flat, and if that was the case, the center would be the lowest part, and the would be the deepest part actually, and the end should pop out of the water, but it doesn't. The water is level all the way across. Curvature has never been measured. Go ahead, Jaron.
An even better one than that is that lake in Russia. I think it's called Bilal or something like that. 395 miles long, and it's frozen between January and May. So if the water curves, as you've said, then there should be 19 miles of curvature present in this lake, and yet the lake freezes and is completely flat. So if that was something, and again, I've never been there, but if I went there and measured that and it showed it to be flat, wouldn't that disprove the ball Earth completely, knowing that a lake freezes over 395 miles and shows no curvature?
Sure. To answer your question, the answer to the question would be yes. However, the important part about this is the diagnosis that you're doing. What scientific method are you using? For example, if I follow some of the videos online about flat Earth theories about planes dipping as they go across the curvature, he's using a level sitting in a seat, about the most unscientific process possible. But I'll give him credit for what he was doing. He was trying to prove that it doesn't dip. Now, not a very good experiment to prove anything. No. So what I ask you, as well as the scientists that studied that to be the geographically most level place on Earth, if that's what it is, what was their science to prove that? And if they prove that, then yes, that's a great hypothesis for what you guys are trying to say with the flat Earth.
Yeah, and that's what becomes difficult is how do we measure those kind of distances, like 395 miles? Because if we use a laser, high-powered laser light, many ball Earth proponents just say that the laser itself is curving with the curvature of Earth. And so this is what we get all the time, is that if everything happens because of the curvature of Earth, well, then you can never disprove the ball Earth, which makes it non-scientific because it's not proven, it's not falsifiable. Because you're basically saying that everything on Earth is curved with the curvature of the Earth, therefore anything you measure will show curve.
Sorry, didn't mean to talk over you.
Let's hop on that for a second. You said it's not falsifiable.
Correct.
Most of the things that we've talked about tonight are from the traditional scientific perspective, peer-reviewed, scholarly, accepted. And you know, the biggest, the scientists on this call, I'm sure would agree. The biggest thing that you can do in science is prove something wrong. I mean, that's what you're trying to do. That's the whole point of the scientific method. Okay, it's wrong. Let's try. What's a new hypothesis? Let's try again.
Can I ask a question on that? So what you're saying is that you think that people who review scientific papers, so the peer review group of, let's say, 400 scientists, if I brought them a paper showing the Earth is flat, you actually think that any of those 400 people would allow my paper to be published, which proves their entire careers as frauds? That's what you actually think humans are capable of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. If you can bring something that is peer review repeatable, then yes, I absolutely think that if a scientist that peer reviews it confirms or doesn't confirm your findings, they would take it objectively. I absolutely believe that.
So there's a guy who submitted a paper showing that he found soft tissue in a dinosaur bone, and he lost his job for submitting that paper. He's Mark Armitage. He's a teacher at Cal State. So, I mean, that just goes to tell you, you go ahead and try and do that. You think it's about proving something wrong, and you go ahead and try and prove dinosaurs existed within the last 50,000 years, and you're no longer a teacher or a scientist.
Wait, I thought you guys, pardon me, but I thought you guys don't believe in dinosaurs.
Well, what do you mean, large reptiles? I believe in large reptiles. I don't think that there's any animals that went extinct 67 million years ago, but I do think that obviously there's animals that grow huge, and before humans were around to hunt them and kill them, then they probably grew quite large. And Jaron,
I apologize for putting words in your mouth. I believe that was more what David said.
Well, I understand what they're getting at when they say that they don't believe in dinosaurs, but I think they would all agree that large animals existed 10,000, 20,000 years ago.
Right. There's large animals today. I mean, there's whales and all sorts of stuff. You know, animals, reptiles, if we left them alone, alligators get pretty big, and maybe if we left them alone, people would think that they were dinosaurs. They just.
But David, didn't you say that dinosaurs did not exist?
Dinosaurs, the way they've explained them to us and the time period they explained them to us, do not exist.
Okay, so I mean, we're going down a rabbit hole here, but to understand the archaeological findings that we have, that when we talk about specific, even a Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatever it is, those did not exist.
So I think Jaron has the dates better than I do, but dinosaurs were hypothesized, and then 10 years or a few years later, somebody that was connected to the people who would benefit from that all of a sudden discovered them. And there's no dinosaur skulls, I believe, that have ever been found. They find a tooth and some crumbled bones, they give it to somebody and say, hey, we think it looked like this, can you build it? And plaster of Paris, and there you go, you got your dinosaur.
I think they found skulls, but no complete skeletons.
Right.
If you're looking for actual bones, no, you'll find calcification. That is you're absolutely right, though. That is a big rabbit hole. Can I ask you guys a similar question to get back to the Earth observations that we were able to conduct scientifically now?
Shoot.
Yes.
I want, and this is an honest question, I just want your guys' take and what the flat Earth theorists believe with regards to the LIGO studies that have been done and the findings that have been done in the last couple of years, and how the gravitational waves that have crossed Earth's path from the theory of two black holes colliding some 100 trillion light years away, however the hell far away it was, we can now observe those theories in real labs. What's your guys' take on LIGO?
Go ahead, Jaron.
Well, I mean, you can ask if he's actually seen the data.
Have you?
No, I have not. If you're talking to me,
have I seen data?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, if you look at LIGO, they had to get money for that. They had to get funding for that, right? So
sure.
Imagine
everything else in the world. Yes.
Okay, so imagine you get all this funding and you find nothing. Do you think that gives you a good chance of getting funding in the future to do other things? And
to answer your question,
speculation.
Hang on.
Sure.
To answer your question, yes. I think that because if you guys know NASA's successes and failures, like you were saying before, there are thousands of experiments that have cost millions of dollars or billions of dollars or whatever that have failed, and those results have been reported as failures. But we all learn, the scientific community in general learns from failures. That's the best part about it, is that we've proven something not to be accurate.
So is there any evidence of science ever fudging results in order to meet corporate objectives or anything? Do you think that's ever?
Hold on. That's a very broad answer to a very specific question. Like, you can't take the guilt of somebody somewhere at some time and plaster that across all of science always ever. That's not fair.
Because what you're doing is you're saying that science always goes through the scientific message. So you're taking quality.
No, I never. No, now you're putting words in my mouth. I never said that. I simply asked about the scientific method and if that's what you use.
No, I'm talking about in this particular case, you're saying that because these guys went through the scientific method and because their funding comes just like NASA's funding, that they must be doing the correct experiments, that they must be not telling.
It strikes me that when you don't have an answer for something, it goes to who's funding it. When you do have an answer for something, it's no longer about who's funding it, but you think you can disprove it. Well, I've asked numerous times for specific examples of where you have conducted studies where you have proven something using, because we all agreed at the very beginning that the scientific method would be a valid way of testing something.
Correct.
I've asked numerous times, give me an example of something that you've used the scientific method, or people that believe the same things that you do of the scientific method, that you've used it to prove what you believe. And when we hit certain topics that you don't have a good answer for, it goes back to, well, it's them doing it.
Okay, you asked about LIGO. Okay, LIGO is a multi-billion-dollar experiment, right? Was it billions? I think it's over millions. Maybe
certainly over a million. I don't know the exact cost, but yes, it'd be safe to say internationally billions. Yes.
Okay, so that project. I mean, if you're asking me as if I have myself physical proof that LIGO isn't true, how would I have that? So if you're asking me that, no. And what I basically,
he was asking your thoughts on it.
Just your perspective. Yeah.
So my thoughts. I started to give my thoughts, and then somebody interjected and said that's conjecture.
Blamed it on conspiracy of spending and almost
take them 100 years. 100 years to the day that Einstein theorized them, they were found. That's not interesting to you?
Coincidental, yes. Interesting, yes, but not conspiratorial. By the way, 620 million was the amount spent so far as of 620 million, not billion.
So sorry, I said billion.
September 18th, 2015. No, that's why I had to look it up too. I didn't know it.
Yeah, I didn't know. No, so I mean, if you're asking me, I guess just if you're asking next time for like scientific evidence, I mean, the weird thing is, and this is a position that we get put in all the time, is that many people who follow science think or agree that science is considered fact. Whatever they have found, whatever the current belief is fact. So we're often put into a place where we're being asked to go up against fact, which is an impossible job. I mean, if you went into a debate with a Christian and they had the right to say that the Bible was fact, then it would be a possible debate, right? You can't defeat them.
I don't think that's what we're asking, though. I think what we're asking is we're talking about certain what we believe are realities based on scientific method. Okay, so it's been tested. That there was a hypothesis thrown out, and then tested, retested, and then tested by other people in peer review. What I'm asking is, has that same process been done on any of the claims that you make?
Yeah, sure. Like boats being able to be seen after they leave your visual perspective. Your eyes see the boat, what appears to go over the water, and anybody who pulls out their P900 can zoom back in and see the boat again. And then if you keep watching the boat, it will eventually mesh in with the horizon. So that the distances that we're able to see boats and buildings and anything is well beyond the ability according to the curvature formula or the line of sight formula for the ball Earth. So when we bring that up, we're told that it's because of refraction. That refraction is lifting the item up over the horizon and showing it to our face. So any evidence that we bring, any proof that we give, well, the deception, I mean, it wouldn't be a very good deception if NASA just, or, the whole scientific entity just said, no, sorry, you guys are right, we're leaving, here's the keys to the, vehicle assembly building. It's not going to happen.
But if you have that boat, you're standing on the shore, and you watch that boat leave, and you're using optics, and you see it, you can no longer see it. It is gone from your view. But if I'm standing at the top of a building that's a few hundred feet above you, I can still see that boat.
Of course, because you're taller, just like I can see further than my 2-year-old daughter, because I'm way taller than her.
But on the flat Earth, why can you see further?
Because on a flat Earth, I can see further than my 2-year-old daughter.
So if it's flat, it's straight out.
It's flat, it's straight out.
It works on a flat Earth the same way. The higher you go, the farther you can see on a flat Earth, because things disappear as the angle of that they go into your eye. So if you're 6 feet tall, you're looking at something on the floor 6 feet in front of you, you can see it clearly because it's at a 45-degree angle. But as you move that thing farther and farther away, and on a flat Earth, the horizon rises up towards your eye level, that gets down to such an angle that once it hits, I think it's 0.2 degrees, you cannot see it anymore. It vanishes from your view. And that's true on a flat Earth. If you raise your height to 20 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, you've now increased the angle to that thing in the distance, and you can see it again. So you can see farther on a flat Earth.
Greg, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, my question was it's parallel to this, and it'll hook back in a second. But what exactly is the horizon then? What is that line that cuts off from the sky and the ground? Like, what is that cutoff?
So if you were to put yourself in the bedroom that you're in right now or whatever, and let's picture that room as an 8-foot ceiling, but it is as big as your city. Okay, so the room that you're in is actually huge, 5 miles far distant from you. If you looked off into the distance, the ceiling of that room will meet the floor. That is the horizon. It's not an actual horizon. There's no horizon there, but that is the distance that you can see. And if we had a light on the ceiling above us and it raced across the room, after 2 miles or so, it's going to dip below that horizon line, and slowly that light will go away. If you're going to be in a dark part of the room, but on the other end of the room, 5 miles away, it would be lit up.
Converging and converging lines. Yes, agreed.
Right. So converging lines. Okay. So then it comes to me that, let's say the horizon keeps going, right? It's all about converging lines. Then having the height difference, right? So if I'm on the ground and I'm looking out and I see my ceiling, my hypothetical ceiling, go off into the distance and it stops at the horizon. If I raise myself up to the top of the ceiling, it's not going to make any difference because they still converge at infinity. That's the whole point to parallel lines, is that they converge at infinity. So at as far away as possible as anything ever. So that's the whole point of converging lines. So in my height difference.
But you said it converges at infinity, but you can put yourself in imagine a 50-mile tunnel. And if you look down to the end of it, it doesn't converge at infinity. It converges at about 3 or 4 miles away from you. So that's where the ceiling meets the floor. There is. Go ahead.
But what about, let's say, we do what David's saying and get a telescope, and I can see the end of the tunnel. So if it's the converging lines, though, they do meet at infinity. That's the whole point to a converging line, is that they, from our naked eyes, sure,
they meet at infinity, but we can't see past 3 miles or whatever the short distance is.
That's my question. Why not?
Because it's the way our eyes work. We can only see when something gets down to an angle of less than 0.5%. We can't see it.
Well, what I was saying is, if you're on the shoreline and you have optics, you can have a more powerful optic than the guy at the top of the building and not see it, but the guy at the top of the building can still see the ship.
Well, how do you know that? I mean, you can, and it also, it's not just, you can't just see forever, because when down on the surface of the Earth, the air is the thickest, there's moisture, there's pollution, there's all sorts of stuff, and all of that adds up and becomes opaque over distance.
And things of any size get smaller as they go away from you. So,
right.
Bill Nye said, why can't we see Spain from the east coast of the United States, which is a ridiculous statement, because we know a car driving away from us in 200 yards becomes imperceptible. So across the ocean, Spain would be the size of a pinhead.
So what you're saying is, then, if we had the right optics, if we had the right piece of machinery, the right telescope, that we could.
No, we're not saying that at all, because you can't see through atmosphere, even on a clear day. After a relatively short distance, it just becomes completely opaque. That's what the sky is. It's just the opaqueness. If you watch a series of mountains, if you go, if you see a series of mountain peaks, even on a clear day, each mountain peak in the distance gets lighter and lighter and lighter until it's just sky. And then there's still a mountain there. You just can't see it because it's blocked by opaque air, which I'll just call sky.
Okay, so that's where I was kind of going with this. That's my parallel. This is where it meets. So geometrically speaking, so if you imagine a right triangle, right? So I'm kind of going off of where we're going into Euclidean geometry here. So let's say we went in and did that experiment where we have somebody on, the beach, and they're looking out at the sun, and the sun is doing its setting thing on the horizon. And then we have somebody else on a 300-foot cliff, and they can see the same thing. But what you're saying is that things disappear because they get sufficiently far away that the atmosphere itself is kind of blocking its picture to us. It's blocking its image. And so my argument against that would be that the person, if it's all the same distance away from anybody, like the same lateral distance from the person that's up here, they're looking through more atmosphere than you are on the ground because it's a hypotenuse of a right triangle. And the hypotenuse is longer than the base of that triangle. So they are looking through more atmosphere. So wouldn't they see it go before you did?
No, the most atmosphere is at the ground level. So anybody on a 300-foot cliff is looking through less atmosphere.
But no, because if it's a triangle, they're looking further. I mean,
You're talking about, think of the difference in the length of those triangles. The hypotenuse is going to be just a semi-tiny bit longer, but the atmosphere is clear.
They're actually looking further, and they're looking through more atmosphere.
The higher you go, the clearer the atmosphere is what Jaron is saying.
Yeah.
Okay. So have you guys ever done this experiment before, where you go off to a beach and you look and you kind of get down on your belly and you watch the sunset, and then you jump up immediately onto your feet and you can see the sun go for about another second after that?
Sure.
Correct.
Oh, the green flash.
The green flash is pretty cool, but that's the whole refraction thing. Right. But what I'm saying is that you can actually see the sun. You can see the sun, like the actual crest of the sun, for a tiny bit longer if you just immediately step up and at your 6 foot tall. So
It
between
works
0
on a-
and 6 feet, it
Works
can't be
on a
that
ball
much
Earth,
different.
works on a flat Earth. It's the same thing on a ball Earth if we could live on a ball. And on a flat Earth, it works the same way. As far as height, you can see farther.
I mean, if you had somebody, let's say, who's laying down on a basketball gymnasium floor, right? That gymnasium floor is flat, but somebody standing up 6 foot tall can see further than that person and more of the items. So if you had a basketball, let's just say, that was all the way at the end of 2 or 3 gymnasiums, the person laying down might have that basketball kind of obscured by the ground that's in front of them, but the person 6 foot tall would be able to see more of that basketball 3 courts away on the ground.
All right, guys. We're getting close to the end here. Another question for you. This goes back to space now. It's my understanding. Well, you obviously don't believe this because you don't believe that we've been to the moon. But it's my understanding that we have reflectors on the moon that we can shoot a laser at and then test the distance from the Earth to the moon. Well, first, Greg, is that accurate? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, it was left by the Apollo astronauts.
Okay, so we can shoot a laser at the moon and say this is the distance. When we do that, David and Jaron, how are we being? I suppose you would say that we're being manipulated or lied to. What number? How is that number coming back differently?
Well, in 1962, lunar ranging experiment was the first successful test of a laser being shot off the moon to determine the distance. So clearly it has nothing to do with Apollo at all, and yet is always brought up as some sort of proof. But look up lunar laser ranging experiment, and it happened in 1962, 7 years before they went there. So clearly the fact that we can shoot lasers off the moon has nothing to do with anybody.
Okay, well, that wasn't my question. My question had nothing to do with who said it there. My question simply means we're able to test the distance.
You didn't hear what Jaron said. They're telling you that they're able to test the distance by bouncing a laser off the moon, but only NASA can do it. And then you sit there and you listen, and all of a sudden you hear, they shoot 50 trillion photons, and then 2 of them come back, 2, and you hear ping, and that they're telling you that is how they determine the distance. But Jaron's telling you that they did it. They also claimed that that's how they knew how far the moon was. They bounced a laser off of it without without a reflector on the moon. So right there, that's deception. They're lying, and none of that is real. None of it.
So you're saying the science behind it is incorrect.
I'm saying that you can bounce a laser off of a reflector. That's easy, but they lied to us. They said that they did it without a laser, without a reflector, and then they said, oh, they put a reflector there, and that's how we've been to the moon. I'm just telling you that it's just
to distill. To distill your point, you're saying that if we shoot a laser at one of those reflectors right now and we get a distance, you're saying that the distance that is that the machine tells us that is reflected to us is incorrect.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
That's a machine that's telling you, number one. Number two, they say they shoot over a few quadrillion.
Well, a calculator's a machine too. I mean,
Okay.
just because it's a machine doesn't mean it's wrong.
Nope, I agree with you. But when they shoot over a quadrillion photons at the moon's reflector that's been placed there for that exact reason, they get back 1 or 2 photons. So yet they were able to determine the distance to the moon to get there by shooting the laser off the moon with no return apparatus. So how did they get that? How did they know the distance?
Adam, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know the particular experiment that you're referring to before the laser went up there, but what I would like, or before the mirror went up and was placed on the moon, but what I would like to know is what were the details in, it sounds like you're typing, what were the details involved with the size of the laser and the type of laser? Because my understanding is that mirror will allow for less massive beams of light to have a detectable reflection that comes back because of that mirror. So my understanding is that it's considerably less powerful lasers that are needed.
It says that reflected off the moon's surface using a laser with a millisecond pulse length. That was 1962.
Do we know do you have this spec? I mean, I know that.
Yeah, I think we're both on Wikipedia right now.
Yeah,
what I'm saying is that powerful of a laser that was used originally before the mirror was up there, is it that much more powerful? Because if it is,
Oh,
then
yeah.
the benefits are
So
not.
in
But
1962, you think that they had a laser more powerful than the one that they shoot now with the multi-quadrillion photons?
Well, they would have to. That's the thing is that they put the lasers up there, or not the lasers. They put the mirrors up there. One, because it's easier. It's a lot more. You can know precisely where those mirrors are, and from that you'd be able to determine more precisely how far away the moon is. But at the same time, you don't have to have a super mega powerful laser taking up so much energy that has to reflect back off the moon back to us.
Isn't
You
it?
can get a way less.
Why is it that NASA always, figures out how to do something and then gets rid of that more powerful thing? Like, we don't have the technology to go to the moon anymore because we've lost all of that. All the telemetry is gone. Who told me that?
Yeah, of course, NASA and every other space agency that's out there has the knowledge of how to get to the moon. The problem,
Jared?
not that, the problem comes to budgeting.
Right. It's the money.
Well, the astronaut, what's his name? He's been up there for years and years and years. I can't remember his name right now. Gosh, why can't I think of his name? Anyway, he says that we can't get back to the moon because we lost the technology and it's too expensive to get it back. That's basically what he said.
There's actually moon missions that are planned in the future as well.
So, guys, I think that's Brent, you had another question.
Well, I just had one question because it's been in the news lately, and it's kind of an out there one, and I wanted to ask what you guys are talking about, because you did bring up mountains. They've talked about mega flora and fauna, about like plateaus, and mountains aren't actually rock, but some flat earthers were saying they were giant trees from the past and were petrified. Do you guys, do you fall into that camp, or do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not me particularly. I mean, I thought it was an interesting video. I think I'm open to listening to everybody's ideas and speculation, and then I just kind of weigh that with my own experience. So for me, I don't have enough research behind whether or not mountains or trees. It certainly appears to me that there are some mountains that are far beyond the size that I would ever imagine any tree trunk being. But I've also seen some buttes in Utah and other places, the Devil's Peak, that certainly appear to be or look like what tree stumps look like. And when you look at I can't remember if they're octagons, but the columns that make them up, that they tell us are from lava, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What makes more sense is that and if you get a tree and look at a tree close, it has the same octagonal columns. So, I mean, I'm not a believer in that because I haven't done the research in it, but it's an interesting video. David?
All right, Jaron, I think right on. Jaron, I think that's a good place to hit, kind of our coast home here. You said I don't have a ton of research on that, but I believe I want to hit this idea one more time. A lot of the things that we've talked about tonight are peer reviewed. Okay, so these are things, when I say peer reviewed, I mean simply that there are different groups of scientists across the country throughout ages that have tested these things and have come back with the same results. Thus, they fit into the scientific method. Okay, so they have been proven to the the scientific community in general. My question is, and I'd love to hear your feedback, and what have a lot of the times when we say things, you say it doesn't make sense to me. That's anecdotal. Anecdotal can't be used in proving things. It just, I mean, whether you believe in the flat Earth or the round Earth, anecdotal can't be used to prove things. What tests have been done in your community that prove some of the things that you have said?
Mostly things that people can do locally, like laser tests across bodies of water. I'd say that's number one. A lot of people just observing distances far greater than they're supposed to. There's, a mountain in France that they've been, it's been spotted. It's like the distance record, 160 miles. It's an 8,000-foot mountain seen from a 1,000-foot observation point 2 times a year. That's the peak is called Canigao, and it's from Aloche, France. That completely, it should be, over 2 miles below the horizon. Yet we're told that. So, I mean, this gets back to that point is what I'm saying is that, yeah, science will tell me that that's refraction, that somehow that's being lifted up. They tell me that the sun, when I see the bottom of the sun hit the horizon, that it's actually below the horizon, but it's being lifted up. But that is something that can be scientifically disproven because you can watch the sun go all the way through its motion around the Earth, and it never has to jump to catch up anywhere. So how is it jumping up to above the horizon? When is it catching up to its regular orbit? It never does that. It just. So
what it sounds like you're saying is there haven't been a ton of tests to prove what you're saying, but what the other people are saying to you doesn't pass the smell test. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
It's so accurate, and I wish that I had the funding NASA had, or I wish I had the. I mean, if somebody, $52 million a day, and we don't have a 24-hour view of the Earth from the space station, which has been
Adam and Tack, quit being dicks, and
I think everyone could probably chime in there. It's not like NASA's got a ton of funding right now.
Let's get something very clear on
$2 million a day.
You ask for what scientific proofs we've done, and there's lots of proofs that the Earth is a ball, but we've scientifically shown that those don't work. Hey, the boat goes over the horizon. Well, no, it didn't. We just zoomed in and it's back.
Zooming in with your cool pics doesn't prove anything.
Proof that the Earth is a ball. Aristophanes proved it by the sun at noon. Making a no shadow on one stick and a shadow and the other, or whatever used. Carl Sagan drilled into our heads that can only be done on a curve. Therefore, the Earth is a ball.
David, with due respect, there's been one or two tests since Aristophanes.
But hang on, the ball Earth in science in school, everyone is taught that test proves that the Earth is a ball, and it doesn't, because it also works on a flat Earth with a close local sun. If you get two posts on a desk, put a light above one of them has a shadow, one of them doesn't. So
you can't use a light on a desk to represent the sun and
why not
something on the Earth.
A light directly above it.
The proportions are completely incorrect.
No, that's not true.
The light source is completely different. I mean, I'm not even a scientist, and I know that.
No, but I'm saying the light from the sun is local and close to the Earth. It actually is a valid test on the flat Earth model, if you understand it.
But it's not. How can it be local and close to the Earth if? And let's assume the Earth is flat, right? So let's assume the Earth is flat, and if you got New York, it's midnight. Over in Germany or something like that, it's like 8 a.m. or something. So it's light over there, but not over New York. But if they're all on the same flat plane, it would be light everywhere. But if you're saying that if it's directional,
not true. You're making a mistake there. Yeah,
if it's directional, you should still be able to see it.
Nope.
From that,
not true. It's close, and it goes past the point of convergence for several reasons. One, perspective.
How do you have proof that it's close? Like what has been done to prove that the sun is that close?
Because you could look at there's. If you look at corpuscular rays, other people will say that that's an illusion, but you can see that the sun. There's so many things. Seasons prove that the Earth is close because they don't make any sense on a ball.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I can explain this perfectly fine.
So, is the sun closer to me during my summer or my winter? I'm in the north.
Actually, yes. So for the northern hemisphere, this is actually pretty cool. But for the northern hemisphere, you're actually closer to the sun during the winter than you are during the summer. It's because the Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees.
So you're saying that angle that the sun is hitting the Earth because when it hits at an angle, the same amount of light is spread over a bigger area, therefore it heats a less heating. Correct?
It's spread. It's not so much spread over a bigger area, but it's spread over a different area. Yes.
Right. So it's coming in at an angle. So on December 21st at noon, when the sun is at its highest point in the sky, I can
lowest.
At noon on December 21st, on the highest point in the sky that day. For December 21st. You can go out at noon. Anybody can do this experiment and stare at the sun with your face and feel the heat on your face. Well, you can barely feel it. You can feel it a little bit, but you can barely feel it. But on June 21st, when the sun rises, the second it comes up over that horizon, when it's at its most severe angle, I mean, it's skimming across the Earth, you can feel the sun blasting on your face. So that disproves the spreading of the light, because we're not talking 23 degrees, a slight little difference. We're talking a massive difference. And
David, I think that we'd all feel better about the discussion if the conjecture was less what you can feel on your face and what you can see with a camera, and more more testable things.
Well, here's the thing. You want to use calculations and everything, but
I do. Math is the universal constant.
You know what? You are giving senses. Every sense in your body tells you that we are flat, stationary, not moving, and the sun is close. Only nonsense tells you otherwise.
So your sensory perception of yourself is what's proving science?
Science has taught us to ignore our senses and believe the lies of men. There's a video called "The Arctic versus Antarctic" by Eric Dubay. Watch that and ask yourself, how is seasons possible like this on a flat Earth? It's a short video, "Arctic versus Antarctic" by Eric Dubay.
Well, all right. So let's go with the thought experiments that you've been going with. If I stuck my hand in a warm bucket of water and then I threw it into a cold bucket of water, my senses would tell me it is burning up. No, I can't trust my senses at that point.
No, you trick your senses there, though.
Yeah, and it's called the Arctic and Antarctic prove flat Earth.
No. I wasn't talking about the video. I was just giving you. You mentioned you trust your senses. I'm saying that our senses can't always be trusted. In that
you can trick yourself.
They are relational to our environment. Isn't that accurate?
Just like my senses say that you can't, as you said, you can't see the boat anymore, and then you pull out your camera and you still can see it. Lying to you there.
That's your senses doing exactly what they're supposed to do. You've lost the ability to see that distance, and then you've used a device to aid your senses. That makes
what are my senses telling me when I throw that hand that was in the cold bucket into the warm bucket and it says it's hot?
Well, because it's not you go through life in normal circumstances. You never have your hand in freezing cold water and then throw it in hot water. So you've completely thrown your senses off kilter by setting up an experiment to prove a point, which that's not your senses, because your senses don't ever sense you with a hand in that water.
Yeah, that doesn't feel right? Because I'm using this wild experiment to give anecdotal evidence.
So here,
that's my point.
I'll give you a better.
That's my whole point.
I'll give you a better
wild experiment to give. Let me finish. You're using this wild experiment to give this anecdotal evidence, and
which one?
I'm sorry.
So you said. So when did we set up our senses to be failless? David was saying that during the summer when the sun rises, that the heat that you feel on your face is hotter than if you look at the noonday sun in December. You did not do anything to trick your senses there. That's not a wild experiment.
And you don't have to use your senses. You can get a bowl, a parabolic bowl, face it at the sun, put a thermometer in there, a scientific thermometer, one that says science on it, and do the same thing at solar noon on December 21st and sunrise on June 21st, and you will see that it is way hotter, way faster on June 21st, and that's because the sun is local and its heat is local.
That's not, and he explained to you why. And you just said no.
No, what do you mean? He explained to me why. He explained to me that the reason it's winter is because the sun is hitting the earth at an angle. Well, guess what? On June 21st at sunrise, you can't get any more of an angle where the sun, that sunlight is spread from horizon across the earth. It's tangent to the earth. It's not shooting down at earth. At noon on December 21st, it's even hotter. It's the angle of the sun.
And yet we're told the rays of the sun come in parallel.
Greg, love to give you the last word on this part of the conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, the only thing I can really think of is I'm going to go back on David's experiment, though. If you take a thermometer and do your parallel dish and everything like that, you still coming in from personal experience. I smoke, and so I'm not allowed to smoke in my house, so I got to go outside for that. In the wintertime, I'll go out and I'll have a cigarette and I'll come back in. My hands are freezing cold. So I'll go in and I'll put them under some just barely lukewarm water, and it feels like it's burning. So that's kind of going back onto that idea that you can trick your senses.
So
and
put a thermometer. Just use a thermometer. Forget I've done it with my face, but I know what the temperature is. Use the thermometer, and you'll see.
So here's the thing, though, is that the thermometer doesn't just read radiant energy from the sun. The thermometer also reads air temperature. So if you were to do this experiment, you would probably want to put it into a vacuum. And so with that vacuum part, then you'd probably end up with exactly the same temperature from the sun as you would in the winter, as you would in the summer. It's if you were
taking out the variables,
taking out all other variables and only having the sun. So you take out the air pressure, you take out air temperature, leaving only the sun. I've never done the experiment, so I can't tell you, but logic would tell me that the sun's the only thing affecting that thermometer. So the sun's going to have the same temperature.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we've hit a lot of the flat Earth tonight. I feel like this conversation could go on for another 4 hours, and we could
not scratch the surface, right?
Yeah. But it's been a great conversation. David and Jaron, I understand that you have some. We are a conspiracy theory, mystery, unexplained show. So, with the final few minutes, are there other conspiracy theories out there that you believe in, that you have thoughts on, that hit us with a quick bullet point list of things that we need to be aware of.
And also, while you're at that too, tell us about your website and the things that you do.
Yes.
Okay, me first. I'll go real quick. You can go to Jeranism.com, or Jeranism is the YouTube channel. I also do a podcast on Monday nights on truthfrequencyradio.com from 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific. So that's where you can find me, and we're always just talking about conspiracies and ways to improve the world. That ultimately, if science was doing things that, and I mean science, not the physical science that people can actually touch and do, because that is great. It's the most wonderful thing on the earth. But the science that's theoretical, when you've got NASA flying around Jupiter, which is a ball of gas in space, and we're spending money on that, I've got a big problem with that, because I think that when we've finished our work here on the earth of making sure everyone's got food and water and shelter and everyone's kind to each other, then we can go ahead and do whatever we want out in La La Land. But to be taking money from people forcibly to show them what I think is CGI images, they don't have any pictures of the earth that should be, it's 2017. And they've got composite images due to satellites orbiting in strips, and they just don't have a picture. They don't have a camera on the moon, a webcam on the moon taking a 24/7 view of the Earth. The ISS, which is in orbit of the Earth, doesn't have a camera 24/7 on the Earth. It's 2017. They get $53 million a day. And I ask you, what has NASA or space travel done for humanity? And anything that you get, you just need to ask yourself after that, well, could that have been done without space travel? And the answer every single time will be absolutely. There's nothing that NASA has done besides build up America's prestige by faking moon landings. As far as other conspiracies, I'm open to all of them. And I think it's the best way we should look at those is look at the mainstream media, get your information from them, and then go and look for alternative sources. And sometimes you're going to find that when you look at those, they're kind of a mess and that they're not making a lot of sense, and the mainstream story might make more sense. But that's very rare, because what you're going to find most of the time is that the researchers doing what the media should be doing, which is actual investigations and thorough research and looking into things completely, those are the people telling the truth. And now we've got a media completely controlled. So anything that happens in this world now goes through a filter before it hits your eyes, and that filter is lying to you. You're watching TV that is corporate funded, corporate owned, and of course everything that we see, everything we hear is backed by some nefarious agency. So I'm open to all conspiracies, because they certainly seem like, the more I research them, that and I've seen some that don't weigh out. Some people were saying that recent flight that killed that soccer team down south, Chapecoense, I heard a lot of people saying that was fake, and I did my research on it and said no, that was a real plane flight that really crashed because the owner of the plane tried to make it without the right amount of gas. So there's real things that happen. Obviously, the world isn't just all fake, but you have to look at every single thing, because most of it is done to fool you in some way, to keep you under their control and to steal from you any way that they can. That's just the nature of people. People in power want to stay in power. So that's all I got.
David?
My YouTube channel is DITRH. It stands for Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. I have most of my videos are under 5 minutes, most of them, and they get you thinking. They'll maybe entice you to go listen to a longer video. Jeranism's YouTube channel is also a great place to learn about the fraud of the space agencies. Sorry, Adam and Tack. Adam, I would love to see from you if you can get your boys up in space to film themselves actually leaving for a spacewalk from the inside through the outside without cutting the film, and when they're outside, do a 360-degree view. Even inside, that would be wonderful. Live, of course, that would be great. And Tack, every time you guys land one of your SpaceX bottoms on the drone barge out in the ocean where nobody can see it, the video cuts out because of, I guess, bad Wi-Fi out there. I would assume that there is a recording of it actually landing without it being edited. We would love to see that. Also, back to you, Adam, the space station, it's amazing. And the guys that built it, I'm sure they probably videoed it in 6 ways to Sunday so Mission Control could see it being built. To date, we have never seen any video of the ISS being built. So I have labeled it the IFS, the International Fake Station.
Call it the ISS.
The ISS. And then the last thing is, if anyone believes anything Jaron and I have said without checking in anything, you're as dumb as you are for believing the lies that the indoctrination system, that they call the education system, has taught you. Take these thoughts and have the courage to go look. A great place, if you don't know, should I go to DITRH? Should I go to Jeranism? Should I go here? There's a channel called ODD Reality, and he has ODD Reality 24/7 live feed. And what that is, he takes all of the best and the newest flat earth stuff and streams it 24/7. So have that playing in the background while you're making your breakfast, while you're turn off the TV for a week, and I guarantee you, anybody that takes the time to really look will drop the ball. Nobody likes having their ball taken away. You have to really go in and be willing to give it away.
And David, before we stop your portion,
I'm done.
Are there any other conspiracy theories that you want to expound upon or think that people need to be woke to?
There's a website, Jaron, what's the name of that website that has all the conspiracies on it?
Stop, Look, Listen, I think.
Stop, Look, Think, or Listen? Stop,
Think.
Yeah, stoplookthink.com. It has a lot of flat earth stuff on there, and there's everything else from the Boston bombing to the London fire.
The Boston bombing, meaning it was fake?
There's so fake it's not even. It's not even a discussion I'm willing to have anymore. Go watch the videos there, the evidence, not just YouTube videos. People say, oh, where'd you get that on YouTube? I defy them to find anything that's not on YouTube. YouTube is like the world. It's like people. There's truth and there's lies all over it. You have to decipher and look for yourself. But the Boston hoaxathon was a complete and total joke, and there's 10,000 pieces of proof. One being, I'll just give you one out of 10,000. The bomb blew up, and right next to it was a Nike banner that didn't have a single hole in it on a fence. Right next to the bomb, not a scratch.
That's another rabbit hole we're going down there.
Yeah. So, but it's all on stoplookthink.com. And by the way, if you go to that website, bring food and water.
And
I was just going to say that I agree that that site's a great place to start. And if you believe anything I say or believe anything in any of my videos, then I do, feel sorry for you, because we should be moving away from hearing people say things and believing them. They can give us thoughts and they can give us ideas, and then we go out and test them. If I ask my mom if she believes in Sandy Hook, that it happened the way we're told, she would say yes. And I don't have a problem with that if the person has done the research on the other side. The problem is my mom has not done the research and won't do it. She refuses to watch anything but the mainstream media. So I do have a problem with those people. But if you actually go and do the research and you can say, I watched these 10 videos and I still believe the mainstream story, then you know what? I don't have a problem with that. The problem is I've never met somebody who said that, because anybody who reviews the evidence will see exactly what's going on in this world, that people are willing to lie to your face and take your money and take your guns. And as long as you sit there and do nothing, well, they'll continue it.
And Tack, I would like to invite you on to Monday Night Raw with Jaron to talk about SpaceX. If you want to come on, we'll treat you with respect. And we'd really like to hear about what you do there and have some questions for you.
And speaking of that, let's hit Adam and Tack. Let them talk a little bit more and say goodbye.
First of all, I want to say to you guys that are coming on to the show with the flat Earth theory perspective, I applaud you. The two of you are two of the more intelligent debaters that I've ever had the honor to listen to.
Some people call us the master debaters.
But I do appreciate it. I want to applaud you and thank you for sharing your perspectives. While I don't necessarily hold all of your perspectives, or many, similarly, I do applaud you for coming on and going against the grain, because the majority of the world thinks differently, and you guys come out and speak very well and educated, and I'm impressed.
Hey, one person I forgot to ask. One person said that there is a proof that the Earth is spinning. I'd love someone to send that to me when they find it.
Okay, I'll have to get your contact information from the guys from Hysteria 51 after this, because I definitely will.
All right. All
right. So, real quick, to answer a couple of the last minute questions that came up, not to debate them, but just to give my perspective on them. First thing is the NASA budget. It was cited several times as how much money NASA gets, and that we should have more proof than that. While I agree there should be enough proof to conclusively tell you or to show to you what I believe, I agree with that should be there, and it's not, or not necessarily in your opinion. NASA's budget is minuscule in comparison to other things that are more relevant in the times. So, for example, just going to give you one thing, and this is from a personal hero of mine, which is Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm stealing a little bit of his quotes in the past for this statement. If you took every NASA budget, every annual NASA budget, and added it together since 1961 or whenever the first NASA budget came out, I don't remember exactly when that was, you would not even come close to touching the amount of money that was given to the bank bailouts back in whatever year it was, 2009, 10, whatever year that was. So just use that as a reference. NASA's budget can always be improved. In fact, both candidates in this last presidential election had great theories on what they could do positively for NASA. So I'm happy on either candidate got in for a NASA perspective.
So something that we didn't touch on is the hoax that is money. Money is just a control method. NASA does not get $52 million a day. They just steal $52 million from the American public. And the bank bailout is the same thing. That's on the back of the American people. It's just a control method. The elite that are doing all of this don't need money, because they can just type numbers, ones and zeros, into computers and create debt for us, and that's how it works. So
while I respect your opinion, I didn't talk over some of your stuff in your closing. Now,
my bad. Sorry.
That's all right. But some of the jokes aside, and on serious topics, of course, that both of us hold pretty serious in our personal lives. Again, thank you guys for coming on. I encourage any of you guys, and I have been begging and looking for a flat earther to also come on one of our podcasts as well, and maybe even host one of our other shows. I mentioned it at the beginning of this show. We host a show called The Twisted 10. The Twisted 10 is a unique top 10 list each week that either one of us as a regular host on that show or a guest host comes on and literally takes over the show for an hour. Some of your guys' theories on some of these conspiracies. Now, Brent and these guys did one on conspiracies too, but more specifically on the flat Earth. I would like to invite you guys right here on Hysteria 51 to come host an episode, and you'll be treated with respect as well.
Guys would be fantastic. That is the perfect format for you.
Yeah, agreed. And we don't necessarily debate your perspective of your top 10 list. We just ask, we work with you during the show to both make it entertaining, because it is a comedy show, but we also want to pull the information out of you. So I would be honored if you guys would even consider that, because I absolutely am fascinated with your guys' perspectives, and you're very well spoken on what you're saying.
I don't know about Jaron, but I'd be very interested, and keeping it funny is easy when you're talking about the ball Earth theory.
I'm totally in. Yeah, definitely would love to.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll definitely shoot you guys the invite. We would be honored for that. But again, my name's Adam. I'm one of the hosts of those shows. There are 4 of us, and we have a 5-person team. We've got a web and admin guy as well. His name's Josh. But thank you guys for having me on, and Tack as well. Tack will get to his stuff in just a second. But thank you very much for having us on. While we are not high-end doctorate scientists that are out there, we do have a different, unique perspective, because we do work in the space agency. And I can go on record and say I haven't signed any part of any conspiracy to cover money or to hide photos or anything from the public. So from my perspective, as much as you'll believe me for saying it, I have never signed anything, and I've worked DOD, DOS, and NASA since 2001. I have never signed anything of those.
No non-disclosure?
Non-disclosures, but more for a corporate entity like intellectual property. Now, there are things at a certain government clearance level that I have had to sign that I wouldn't release. But from my perspective and what I do, none of that had anything to do with theories or cover-ups or anything that I've ever had an interaction with. Now, mind you, I don't deal with photos in space. I'm an IT guy at heart, so most of what I do is the support infrastructure for those systems. So just from my perspective, I will tell you that I've never signed any or have any knowledge of any kind of conspiracy or cover-up. I'll go on record saying that anywhere you would like me guys to do that. But I'm Adam, and thank you again, by the way, guys. I really appreciate your perspectives. You were 3 versus 2 tonight, and you guys did awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't get a chance to talk much tonight. That'd be kind of be more aggressive, I guess. But I definitely enjoyed listening. So I work at SpaceX. I'm a security officer. I'm not an engineer or anything. I'm just a security officer. However, we are still involved with day-to-day operations. So there are people that I've seen videos and stuff, people claiming that SpaceX is phony and SpaceX is CGI, and with the takeoffs and the landings. You said we landed on the barge. Well, we also landed on our landing pad as well. So, and if you think it's not real or CGI, whatever, I invite you 100%. You can come right down here and visually watch it come right down and land.
Tack and I often get passes to bring visitors with us out to approximately the vehicle assembly building out at the base. So you would have to ride with us in our car. So you'd have to trust us. We give you our credentials, but we would.
You can actually go to a David Copperfield exposition where he'll actually make the Statue of Liberty disappear. I don't know if you've ever been there and seen that, but that can be done in person too.
Yeah, but you can't make up those sonic booms when that vehicle lands back on the pad at Kennedy Space Center. That can't be made up.
Planes can't fly overhead and create sonic booms? It's interesting. I thought that.
Are you claiming that it's an airplane crashing into the ground every time that we land the first stage?
A plane can fly overhead and create a sonic boom, right?
Oh, well, yeah, but why when you can literally watch the first stage come back down? Wouldn't that just create
where can
from 3 miles away?
I'm sorry?
From 3 miles away? How close can we get to a SpaceX rocket landing?
Oh, you can very close. You can see it. You are literally watching. It's not a question of it's not a tiny light in the distance. You visually see the rocket come down.
Right, and you can go to a magic show and watch a car literally disappear. So, what I'm saying is you can see
that doesn't make any sense. I'm saying you can come down.
I've never been to a magic show and seen that.
Right. So you can come down
That's my evidence.
And just watch it. I'm not going to perform a huge magic show. I promise. I don't have that kind of money.
You can be fooled into believing that you saw a rocket land 3 miles away.
My question to you guys would be, could you be fooled if you came with us?
Maybe.
Right.
We'd love to come. So we're in.
We got to wrap up. Greg, I believe you're a podcast virgin. Is that not right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's
jumped in feet first, so thank you on that.
Well, I like talking. I've been thinking about making my own podcast. I'm like everyone everyone here has something, like they got a YouTube or a podcast or something like that. I did have a YouTube, and it was going pretty good until I got into high school teaching, and that took up literally all of my time. So I haven't just
tomorrow. You can't trust them.
Yeah, it's too much time. And so, I mean, I thought about doing something this summer, but then I just enjoyed not working. So
Greg, since you don't have anything to plug, why don't you wrap us up here with your final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts about this whole thing is when taking into account everything all at once, it's talking about all of the observational evidence that's been collected over the past 4 or 5 centuries. It's actually even more than thousands over the past couple millennia. It all comes down to the simplest explanation, at least in my eyes, and I can't say this about Jaren or David, but it's in my eyes at least. The simplest explanation is that the Earth is a ball. It's a sphere, or spheroid, I should say, because it's not exactly a sphere, but it's spheroid, that orbits the sun, which is also a sphere. And that's pretty much as simple as it could possibly get. Then it does have, it fits every single explanation, and it matches with things that, it matches the math, it matches all the observations that humans have made, and it's super simple. And it doesn't have to take into account, it doesn't have to take into account all the stipulations and all of the rules. There's just one simple rule that the Earth is round, it spins, and it orbits the sun. That's it. So that's pretty much about it.
On that note, we appreciate it, gentlemen. We all appreciate you joining us tonight. I don't know if we cranked anyone's brain one way or the other.
Hey, I learned stuff. I learned stuff from the flat Earth side. I learned stuff from the globe side. I had a blast because everyone here knew their shit. And I was so enthralled with that. And I was afraid it might degrade into arguing and stuff. And everyone here was classy. You were respectful to one another. And I couldn't ask for a better round table.
Yeah, guys, all of you, we appreciate it. We think you all did a great job, and we hope you will come back to the show at another time, and we'll continue this discussion.